Chapter 423. Fury of Vajra Evil Devils, Retreat. Hidden Heart's eyes twitched when he saw the pink sword beams unleashed by the couple, which looked evil and was filled with a fishy aroma. Abruptly, his right fist transformed into a lotus shape, and 5 beams of white light shot out from his 5 fingers, smashing viciously onto their chests. The man and the woman felt as if they were struck by a thunderbolt. Their bodies withered abruptly, and they were knocked several tens of feet backward before falling limply to the ground, unable to move anymore. Hidden Heart grabbed the 2 pink sword beams in his hand, and a faint Buddhist light burst out from it. The 2 sword beams produced a sharp hissing noise, and very soon, a large amount of pink smoke was sprayed out from them, which was accompanied by a strange fragrant and foul smell that drifted in the air. In the end, only 2 flying swords, each about 3 inches long and as wide as willow leaves, were left in Hidden Heart's hand, glinting and twitching with a white light. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. The quality of these 2 flying swords was pretty good, and they were obviously 2 upper-grade magical treasures. However, the man and woman had tempered them with an evil sword refining technique. As a result, these 2 flying swords were tortured to a horrible state, and their power had been greatly reduced. It was like a pair of 1,000-li horses. If you forced them to pull a few thousand kilograms of scrap metal and let a few old farmers control them, what would be the use of the horses? Looking at the 2 flying swords, Wu Qi shook his head and sighed. This is the best way to burn the zither and cook the crane. TSK, these 2 swords are pretty good. They are actually crafted with dark frost goldstone. It's a pity that their crafting technique is not good enough. Otherwise, dark frost goldstone is the best ice element material among all the first-grade flying swords. Hidden Heart hefted the 2 flying swords in his hand, then strode towards the group of men and women. Guarding Heart had also called over all the monks in the temple, producing a few lengths of hemp rope and tying up the 5 men and women with weak cultivation base. After tying the 5 of them up like dumplings, Guarding Heart casually chanted an incantation and pointed his finger at the hemp rope. Immediately, the ordinary hemp rope shone with a golden light, as if it was made of gold. It was a minor restrictive technique of the Buddhist League, a technique used by wandering monks to control evil spirits. It was a very magical technique, and all of them tended to be practical, without any fancy tricks. For example, with the cultivation base of early-stage Jin Dan realm, Guarding Heart could casually turn the hemp rope into a golden rope, which allowed him to imprison a cultivator of mid-stage Jin Dan realm. It was a very powerful technique of the Buddhist League. As the 5 men and women only had the cultivation base of peak stage Xiantian realm, they could not move after being tied by the golden rope. As they only had the cultivation base of peak stage realm, they could not move at all. He formed a Buddhist seal with both of his hands and carefully pressed them down from his dantian to his chest to his forehead. With every Buddhist seal he pressed down, a wheel of golden light would enter the 2's bodies. The man and woman's bodies twitched, and all of their cultivation and mobility were sealed. Monk Chi Tian, who had just been saved, angrily took out a big basket of hemp rope and tied the man and woman up like mummies. Chi, and spirit. Chi, he took, Chi, and took, Chi, monk. The man narrowed his eyes and kept his mouth shut, not saying a word. Meanwhile, the green-clothed girl struggled desperately and snapped, "Bald donkeys, how dare you touch even a single hair of mine? The Min clan of Anhe City is not someone you can afford to offend. Release us now and tear down the temple. Or else, when my patriarch arrives, all of your bald heads will be smashed." There was a fist-sized bun in Wu Qi's hand. Chi-Chi's cooking skill was not very good, as the core of the bun was still wet, and had not been fully steamed. Wu Qi kneaded the dough into something that looked like a cucumber, then rose to his feet and came before the green-clothed girl. While she was cursing, Wu Qi shoved the dough into her mouth and stopped her from cursing. After finishing all the porridge in the bowl with one gulp, Wu Qi casually slapped the bowl and split it into 2 pieces. Pointing the sharp edge of the bowl at the man's carotid artery, Wu Qi said coldly, "I'll count to 3. Tell me everything you know about Min clan. If you don't, you'll die." 3, He counted to 3. Abruptly, a pungent smell wafted out from the man's crotch, and a stream of water sprayed out. Spare me. Fellow Taoist, Senior, Master, spare my life. I'm Min Hua, the 4th generation eldest grandson of Min clan. That is my 9th sister, Min Yi. My patriarch, Reverend San Lo, is a disciple of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, with a cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm. A month ago, he finished his apprenticeship and came to Anhe City to build his foundation. Wu Qi did not need to force him any further, as Min Hua had already told him all the details of Min clan. Euphoria Heavenly Palace was an evil sect that specialized in practicing the dual cultivation technique between men and women. Its headquarters was located on Blissful Peak, 100,000 miles east of Anhe City. After Reverend San Lo formed his nascent soul, he was ordered by his master to develop his power in Anhe City. Apart from looting money and all kinds of cultivation materials, his main purpose was to find handsome men and beautiful girls for Euphoria Heavenly Palace as cultivation vessels. Anhe City was one of the largest cities within 100,000 mile circumference. A long, long time ago, it was a county city under the rule of the human emperor. However, as the forces of immortal sects kept invading Anhe City, Yu only had the ruling power of Anhe City and the surrounding areas nominally. In fact, it had become an autonomous city, and the position of the city lord changed every 1,000 or 800 years. This time, it was Euphoria Heavenly Palace who had traveled 10,000 miles and killed the abbot of Jade Pagoda Temple on Mount Tiji, Ning'an, at the cost of severely wounded Lady Qiao, the master of Jade Pagoda Temple on Mount Tiji. That was why Reverend San Lo brought a group of his clan members to Anhe City, killed Reverend Jing'an, the city lord sent by Jade Pagoda Temple, and occupied the position of city lord. Using a sharp stubble, Wu Qi carved an exquisite little tortoise on Min Hua's face, letting the blood flow down his face. Intentionally, Min Hua, who was shivering with fear, had a clear look at the blood on the porcelain. He smiled and asked, with Lady Qiao's cultivation base, how many experts does she have? Let's not talk about nascent soul cultivators, but how many nascent divinity, half-step immortals, and heaven immortals do they have? Min Hua opened his mouth and carefully told Wu Qi about Euphoria Heavenly Palace's overall strength. The master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Lady Qiao, was a 36th tier heaven immortal. There were 4 nascent divinity cultivators under Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Although this overall strength did not seem to be worth mentioning, Lady Qiao had countless guests, including heaven immortals with very formidable cultivation bases, important ministers who held a high position in the imperial court of Yu, and even some unknown people who had nepotistic relationships with Lady Qiao. As a result, Euphoria Heavenly Palace was a power that no one dared to offend within the area 1 million mile circumference except for Jade Pagoda Temple. The reason why Lady Qiao was able to kill Ning'an, the master of Jade Pagoda Temple, was because one of her gigolos had concocted a batch of Yin thunderbolts with incredible power, capable of severely wounding lower-grade heaven immortals. In order to please Lady Qiao, right after the Yin thunderbolts were produced, the man eagerly gave 3 of them to Lady Qiao. With the power of 3 heavenly thunderbolts, Lady Qiao had to pay the price of severely wounding herself to kill Grandmaster Ning'an, and massacre the entire Jade Pagoda Temple. Behind Jade Pagoda Temple was a powerful Buddhist league. Obviously, Lady Qiao's gigolos had contributed a lot to the massacre of Jade Pagoda Temple. Min Hua stared at Wu Qi in horror, sobbing and saying, "It is said that when Palace Master brought a few elders and massacred Jade Pagoda Temple, a few heaven immortal seniors who were on friendly terms with Palace Master had blocked the entrance of Golden Pavilion Temple, forbidding the few elders from leaving the temple. That's why we were able to get rid of those bald Grand Masters from Jade Pagoda Temple." Upon hearing that, Hidden Heart sighed, shook his head and said, "Buddha is merciful." Grandmaster Jing'an was struck by a fiend calamity. Poor Grandmasters from Jade Pagoda Temple, as they are all eminent monks with a profound understanding of the Buddhist Dharma, and have reached an unfathomable level. What a pity, what a pity. Looking at Hidden Heart's gloomy face, Wu Qi asked in a deep voice, "What is your purpose in coming to Temple of Hidden Heart?" Min Hua glanced at the surrounding monks, then said with a long face, "We are actually here to build a summer manor. We've already found out that Temple of Hidden Heart is just a group of wild monks without any backing, all itinerant cultivators. If they were the disciples of Jade Pagoda Temple, the elders of Euphoria Heavenly Palace would have long come here. But, since they are itinerant cultivators, we can just drive them away. Why do we have to provoke Golden Pavilion Temple?" Wu Qi nodded silently. As long as they could drive them away, there was no need to provoke Golden Pavilion Temple. After all, Euphoria Heavenly Palace had always been a vicious and evil sect. Throwing the broken bowl far away, Wu Qi smiled at Hidden Heart and said, "Grandmaster, I've gotten the confession. Tisk, it's up to you how to deal with this matter." Patting Min Hua's face, Wu Qi whistled frivolously at Min Yi, whose face had turned blue with anger. After that, Wu Qi went to Lao Ai, squatted next to him, and said with a low voice, "A formidable enemy has arrived. TSK, TSK. Prince of Changxin and his disciple have lost their cultivation base, making them even weaker than ordinary mortals. Even if they want to escape, they can't." Lao Ai's face turned pale. Furiously stroking his own finger, he growled in a low voice, "Jing Ku, this is not the end of you. If not for him shattering my storage ring with the sun-piercing white rainbow, how could I end up like this?" After growling a few times in a low voice, Lao Ai glanced at Wu Qi with a gloomy face and said with a sneer, "What are you so proud of? We are on the same boat now." While moving his lower body proudly, Lao Ai laughed presumptuously and said, "Euphoria Heavenly Palace's Lady Qiao. Hee hee, as long as Lao Ai can sleep with her, this foundation will be in my palm." Wu Qi mercilessly attacked Lao Ai, "Your meridians are all broken now, and you can't use any of your cultivation base. But, you still have a huge amount of energy essence left in your body, and you have even formed your nascent divinity. TSK, if Lady Qiao pushes you down on the bed, are you going to seize her foundation, or are you going to deliver a great tonic pill to her?" Lao Ai's face fell, as he gave Madman Shui a panicked look. Madman Shui shook his head, pointing at his own face and saying in a low voice, "Master, I have an ugly face, and that Lady Qiao will never like me. But, Master, you are a tall and mighty man, a handsome and extraordinary man, and you have a good pair of clothes. The energy essence in your body is scattered but not gathered. You are simply an excellent tonic." In the other room, Hidden Heart was frowning as he ordered Guarding Heart and Qi Tian to move the few men and women into Temple of Hidden Heart. The old monk was mumbling something under his breath, and his face was filled with hesitation, as if he was in a difficult position. All of a sudden, Hidden Heart cried out, "Junior brother, Guarding Heart, Qi Tian, all of you, leave now. Leave now. This fiend tribulation is too much for me to handle. Go, 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 quickly leave this place. Come back after 49 days. Laughing complacently, Wu Qi patted Lao Ai's shoulder and said word by word, "Even this old monk is preparing for his nirvana. TSK, Prince of Changxin, I have high hopes for your potential." Lao Ai gnashed his teeth as he stared at Wu Qi and said in a ferocious voice, "Wu Qi, what are you trying to do?" Staring at Lao Ai, Wu Qi laughed and said in a low voice, "Take the poison I concocted with a secret technique and follow me from now on." Lao Ai stared at Wu Qi in exasperation, looking as if he could not wait to bite Wu Qi's neck and tear off a piece of his flesh. Just when he was venting his anger, a sweet fragrance suddenly came from the air. An old Taoist priest, who wore a pink Taoist robe and had a pair of bitch eyes, squinted his eyes into a line, rode on a cloud. Behind him were dozens of men and women dressed in Taoist robes. They arrogantly flew to the top of the deep valley. "What a bunch of bald donkeys! How dare you hurt my descendants and guests? Today will be the day you die." The old Taoist sneered and pointed his finger downwards. Immediately, 10 pink sword beams shot out from all 10 of his fingers, thrusting towards Temple of Hidden Heart. Chapter 424. 10 sword beams sprinkled down. Each of them was about 3 feet long and as thick as a thumb, and the quality of their light was considered excellent. It was evident that Reverend San Li's cultivation base was one realm stronger than Min Hua and Min Yi, and his ability in refining sword beams was much better. Meanwhile, a large amount of pink arrow-shaped smoke was shooting out from the sword beams, filling the air with a rich aroma, as well as a strange greasy smell that could make one's bones and muscles go limp. The few little monks from Temple of Hidden Heart were still far away from the smoke, but when they were hit by the smell, they immediately fell to the ground. Hidden Heart gave a furious roar as he stamped his foot on the ground. The ground trembled abruptly, as a large hand made of mud and sand thrust out from under the ground, shrouded in a faint Buddhist light. It scooped up the few little monks and threw them into the temple. Guarding Heart, bring everyone into the temple and summon the Buddhist energy to protect the temple, cried the old monk. Wu Qi had already sprung to his feet. With one swift motion, he grabbed Lao Ai and Madman Shui, who could not move freely, and rushed into the main hall of the temple. Kicking away the yellow linen cloth that covered the offering table in the middle of the hall, Wu Qi shoved Lao Ai and Madman Shui under the long table, then sat down cross-legged. His movements were extremely nimble, and it was impossible to tell that he was an injured person whose spine and ribs had been broken by someone. Guarding Heart hurriedly led the crowd into the hall, throwing Min Hua and the other 6 little monks to a corner of the hall. After that, led by the oldest monk, the junior brother mentioned by Hidden Heart, the group of 17 to 18 monks knelt on the cushions, put their palms together, closed their eyes, and began to recite a scripture. Wu Qi listened attentively to their scripture. It was similar to the Diamond Sutra, but it was 30 to 50% different. The language was more exquisite, and the wording was simpler. Every single sentence was filled with an indescribable, powerful charm. Qi Tian knelt on the ground in a sorry state as well. His body was too fat, and when he knelt down, the entire temple shook a few times. With great difficulty, he put his palms together before his plump chest, then began to recite a Buddhist scripture as well. What surprised Wu Qi was that the willpower of the Buddhist League emanating from Qi Tian was only slightly weaker than that of the old monk and the little monk, Guarding Heart. However, Qi Tian monk clearly had no cultivation at all. Wu Qi stared at the fat monk with astonishment, nodding his head silently. Buddhist techniques emphasized the cultivation of the heart the most. This fat fellow was the same as that old monk. His heart had probably been immersed in Buddhist scriptures, right? Hidden Heart's loud cries were heard coming from outside the temple. Loud booms kept ringing out, accompanied by gusts of wind, thunderbolts, golden light, and pinkish light that shot in all directions. The front gate and the surrounding walls of the temple had been blown away by the strong wind. All of a sudden, a gust of wind blew over their heads. The roof of the Buddhist temple was swept up by the gust and flew away in the blink of an eye. A dozen cultivators clad in Taoist robes brought here by Reverend San Lo were seen hovering above the grand hall, laughing and joking as they stared mockingly at the dozens of monks sitting cross-legged in the hall. Wu Qi and the other 2 poked their heads out from under the altar table and glanced at the cultivators above. Lao Ai was so angry that his lips were trembling. If I wasn't injured, I could crush tens of thousands of these lowly things with just a finger. There is no room for them to be so arrogant before me. Cut the crap, said Wu Qi rudely. Those who can't even walk steadily nowadays are not qualified to boast like that. In short, either you follow me from now on and listen to my orders, or... Ha! 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 Wu Qi let out a strange laugh. Lao Ai's scalp went numb because of Wu Qi's laughter. What are you laughing at? He asked angrily in a low voice. Wu Qi snorted coldly and said, if you don't listen to me, I'll seal your divine will and throw you out of here, letting those men and women from Euphoria Heavenly Palace pluck your energy essence, turning you into a perfect tonic pill for them. After that, I'll get you out of here, destroy your Tao Foundation, and sell you to a brothel. Those rich wives from the wealthy and powerful families, those ugly women who are between 70 and 80 years old, will definitely love you. Lao Ai was trembling with rage. But, when he thought of the miserable situation he would be in after Wu Qi did what he wanted to do, he suddenly became weak and feeble. He breathed out a soft sigh and said, "Hee hee, little rascal, you better not fall into my hands in the future." Giving Lao Ai a deep look, Wu Qi said with a deep voice, "Swear it. Swear with your soul and blood that you will listen to my orders willingly from now on. I won't force you into a dead end. If the person who controls your soul wants you to do something, I won't stop you. But, you have to swear that if there is a conflict between me and that person, you have to inform me in advance." Lao Ai cried out in panic, then sprung up abruptly, nearly knocking over the heavy altar table. He stared at Wu Qi in astonishment and cried out, "How did you know about that? Damn you, Ji Dan, how could he tell you such a secret? Ah, you are." Rolling his eyes, Lao Ai lowered his voice and murmured, "He sent you here, hee hee, to find the method to remove the restrictive spell." Wu Qi smiled, reached out his right hand, and said, "My conditions are very favorable. In the future, if that person wants you to do something for him, just inform me, and I won't stop you. If there is a conflict between me and that person, and I become his enemy, just inform me in advance. Before that, if I save you today, you will be mine from now on. Isn't this a very favorable condition?" Lao Ai pondered for a brief moment, then gave Wu Qi a deep look, reached out his right hand, and grabbed Wu Qi's hand. Holding Wu Qi's hand tightly with his fingers, Lao Ai said in a deep voice, "In the future, if you can find the method to remove the restrictive spell, if you can help me get rid of that person's control, I'll willingly work for you." "So what? But, you can't stop me from doing something." After pondering for a while, Wu Qi nodded and said, "I'm not the savior of the world, so you can do whatever you want. As long as you don't harm the people around me, or the acquaintances of those people around me, you can do whatever you want." Both men clenched their hands and reached an agreement. Without hesitation, Lao Ai bit his finger and swore a vicious blood oath with his nascent divinity. Madman Shui followed suit, swearing the same oath as his master. It was not easy to violate a blood oath made by a cultivator. Unless the cultivator had cultivated to a realm that surpassed the laws of heavenly Tao, the blood oath would follow the cultivator for the rest of his life. While Lao Ai and Madman Shui were swearing, Wu Qi had squeezed out 2 drops of his blood essence and added them to the blood oath. With that, the blood oath between the master and his disciple was completely under Wu Qi's control. Even if Lao Ai and Madman Shui found some spirit items such as soul substitution puppets in the future, as long as the power of those spirit items did not exceed the limit that Wu Qi could control, he did not have to worry that they would violate the blood oath and do something harmful to him. Looking at how Wu Qi still wanted to add a restrictive spell to the blood oath, Lao Ai said resentfully, "You're a very cautious little fellow." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a sideways glance, then said mockingly, "Since I'm dealing with a gentleman, I'll naturally use the means of a gentleman." Lao Ai was taken aback, then he flew into a rage and said, "Did you just say that I'm a treacherous villain?" Wu Qi did not pay any attention to Lao Ai. Instead, he fished out 2 9th-grade immortal pills from Black Dragon's spirit ring and gave them to Lao Ai, then took out 2 upper-grade spirit pills and gave them to Madman Shui. "Take these 2 immortal pills, and the wounds in your meridians should be completely healed. Madman Shui's cultivation base is too weak, and there is no way he can withstand the power of the immortal pills. 2 upper-grade spirit pills should be more than enough for him to recover." Without hesitation, the master and his disciple grabbed the spirit pills and shoved them into their mouths, fearing that Wu Qi would regret his decision and take them back. Over the past half a year, the master and his disciple had tasted the pain of being an ordinary mortal who did not even have the strength to truss up a chicken. They did not want to return to that miserable situation ever again. After swallowing the immortal pills, Lao Ai could feel the enormous immortal energy rolling and rocking in his body, quickly breaking through the clogged blood and qi and connecting the broken meridians. He praised, "These are indeed immortal pills. Hee hee, I owe you a big favor." "Humph, you're right, I've never considered myself as a good man." Rolling his eyes, Lao Ai murmured under his breath, "When my 2 sons were thrown to their death by Yingzheng, my soul was standing right next to them. At that time, I would have completely turned into a bastard." Laughing ferociously, Lao Ai gazed at the group of dozens of cultivators hovering in the sky with a pair of venomous eyes. Although his cultivation base had yet to recover, in Lao Ai's eyes, these cultivators had become ants that he could easily slaughter. Right at this moment, Hidden Heart rushed into the hall, gasping for breath and covered in blood. Right after he entered the entrance, he tripped on the threshold and tumbled a few times before falling into the hall. The old monk clenched his jaws and said, "Guard Heart, the fiend flame is rising. Please protect the temple with the power of Buddha. Quick!" Reverend San Li's wild laughter was heard coming from above. He had brought a group of cultivators and arrived right above the hall. Looking down through the open ceiling, he said with a smile, "Bald donkeys, I asked you to move out nicely, but you insisted on making such a big fuss. Since that's the case, I'll wipe out your nest of bald donkeys today. Quickly release my grandson and the guests, and I'll let you die a quick death." He casually pointed his finger out, unleashing a pinkish sword beam. As he was about to hack down, Guarding Heart suddenly cried out the name of Buddha, and a sheet of Buddhist light sprinkled out from both palms. The Buddhist light sprinkled onto the 5 golden-painted Buddha statues in the hall, while a Buddhist chant towered into the sky. Wu Qi, who was hiding under the offering table, was still fine, but Lao Ai and Madman Shui were shaken by the sudden chanting, and nearly fell to the ground. At the same time, a faint golden light radiated from all 5 Buddha statues. As the chanting continued, a large sheet of golden flame towered into the sky, transforming into a several tens of feet thick Buddhist barrier that enveloped the entire temple of Hidden Heart. These 5 Buddha statues were personally carved by Hidden Heart when he built the Temple of Hidden Heart. Over the past several hundred years, a group of monks had been chanting Buddhist scriptures day and night, accumulating a great amount of willpower of Buddhist League. Now, when the willpower was stimulated with Hinayana Buddhism, it immediately transformed into an impenetrable barrier of Buddhist light. The willpower of Buddhist League contained in the 5 Buddha statues was very pure, and the amount was enormous. After all, it had been accumulated over several hundred years. Therefore, its power was like an endless stream of water. The golden Buddhist light enveloped the entire temple. When the sword beam that Reverend San Lu thrust down a moment ago bumped into it, it sprayed out a plume of pinkish smoke and flew backward while wailing. Reverend San Lu flew into a great rage. "Bald donkey! I never thought that with your weak cultivation base, you could actually have such a trick." Furious, Reverend San Lu cried out, "Fellow Taoist Flaming Crow, please use your divine ability and refine these bald donkeys. Since that golden pavilion temple has already swallowed the anger from Jade Pagoda Temple, I don't think they will come to us for the sake of a few itinerant cultivators." A handsome Taoist clad in a bright red Taoist robe chuckled. He had a kind face and looked like a virgin, and was clad in a bright red Taoist robe. He took a few steps forward and fished out a fist-sized red gourd from under his sleeve. Carefully, he reached out 2 fingers and pulled out the stopper, then hastily threw the gourd away. A muffled boom echoed out, as if a volcano was hanging upside down in the sky, while a great amount of lava and flame fell whistling down from the sky. In just a blink of an eye, the valley, which measured over 10 miles in circumference, was turned into a sea of flame. Apart from the monastery, everything else had been completely burned down by the fire. Chapter 425. As the fire poured down, the crimson flame turned into a pale green flame in just a blink of an eye, and then turned into a translucent white flame. The rocks in the valley first exploded, then shattered, and finally turned into lava, rushing and surging around the Temple of Hidden Heart, which was shrouded in a golden light. Even though it was protected by the golden light transformed from the Buddhist energy, the temperature in the temple was still rising rapidly. Before long, a few nearby rooms were set ablaze. Moments later, the verdant branches of the Bodhi trees withered and shriveled. All of a sudden, a few Bodhi trees near the temple were dried up and turned into blazing torches, adding some heat to the air. What a pity! Looking at the tiny fire gourd hovering in the sky, Wu Qi could not help but sigh with mixed emotions. It was an acquired spirit item, similar to the acquired flame pearl in his body. Judging from its power, it should be a treasure that had absorbed the underground fire essence near the volcanic crater. But too bad, before it could fully mature, Taoist Flaming Crow had plucked it and refined it into a magical treasure. If it were plucked after it was fully matured, it would at least be an upper-grade immortal item after being meticulously refined by a heaven immortal item crafting master. However, after being messed around with by Taoist Flaming Crow, the energy in the gourd had been completely depleted, and it had lost all its magical functions. Although the flame it sprayed out was very powerful, it was at most equivalent to the prime flame of a nascent soul cultivator. How could it have the power? Besides, the flame it sprayed out was a dead flame that had no source. Once the gourd was put away, the flame would be extinguished immediately. It was not a good treasure at all. What a waste. I don't even have the thought of robbing him. Wu Qi smiled bitterly. He saw that Hidden Heart and the others were already drenched in sweat, and were busy chanting scriptures, trying to squeeze more Buddhist power out of the Buddha statues to protect the temple. All of a sudden, a deep rumble of thunder was heard coming out of the fire gourd. A crimson flame thunderbolt shot out and plunged towards the ground like a shooting star, smashing viciously onto the golden Buddhist barrier hovering above the temple. A deafening boom rang out, and the entire temple shook violently. The walls around the hall collapsed one after another, with broken bricks and tiles falling down and smashing the heads of those monks standing behind Hidden Heart and guarding Heart. The chanting of scriptures stopped abruptly. The Buddhist light released by the 5 Buddha statues dimmed down abruptly, while the Buddhist light barrier above the temple was compressed to about 10 feet thick, and the coverage of the Buddhist light had shrunk by half. From the courtyard behind the temple came the screams of hounds and other animals. The cries only lasted for a short moment before they abruptly stopped. Some of the animals raised in the monastery had already been burned to ashes by the fire. Lao Ai pursed his lips and cursed in a low voice, "These damn bald donkeys. They raised a bunch of good livestock, but they wasted their rice and flour for nothing. Yet, they refused to burn one for me to have a sumptuous meal. How hateful." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a sidelong glance and scolded with a smile, "He saved you. Why are you still talking so much nonsense?" Lao Ai shut his mouth sulkily. He was too lazy to quarrel with Wu Qi. In his opinion, it was a disgrace to quarrel with a junior. Moreover, Wu Qi and him were old enemies, but not friends. Now that he was forced to swear such an oath by Wu Qi, he felt very uncomfortable. Therefore, Lao Ai twitched his mouth and sat cross-legged under the offering table, focusing all his attention on circulating his energy and regulating his breath, trying to quickly restore his overall strength with the help of the immortal pills. That Taoist Flaming Crow was merely an early-stage nascent soul cultivator, an ant that Lao Ai could kill with just a mouthful of water. The fire gourd was not bad, and Lao Ai was very interested in seizing it to protect himself. After all, his storage ring was destroyed by Jing Ku, and he had to rob those poor itinerant cultivators to gather enough money to travel to Panga continent. He was so poor now that his eyes had turned green. But, in order to seize the fire gourd, he had to restore his cultivation base. Even if he could not return to his peak state, as long as he could restore his overall strength to the early-stage Jin Dan realm, Lao Ai was confident that he could kill this group of itinerant cultivators. He did not take Reverend San Lu and Taoist Flaming Crow seriously at all. As the Buddhist light was severely damaged, Guarding Heart grunted and fell to the ground. Coughing up a mouthful of blood, he called out to Hidden Heart in a low voice, "Master, Master, please leave this place alone. Once you have formed your relic lotus throne, you will be equal to the nascent soul realm of Tao League. At that time, you can come back and avenge me." Hidden Heart clenched his jaws. He raised his head and looked at the raging flame in the sky, then cried out in a low voice, "Guarding Heart, bring your uncle master and junior brothers and leave this place. I want to stay here. This is my fiend tribulation. If I can't survive it, I will turn into ashes. But, if I can, I have a chance of attaining the rightful fruit of becoming a gold arhat. I've gone through 30 transmigrations, and this is my opportunity." Wu Qi raised his head and looked at Hidden Heart with astonishment. He was an eminent monk who had gone through 30 transmigrations. Judging from his cultivation base, it seemed like the cultivation base of his previous 29 transmigrations was just as so-so. Then, he saw Hidden Heart sprung up into the air and leaped onto the lotus throne of the Buddha statue in the middle, reaching out his hands and thrusting them forcefully into both of the statue's eyes. A series of creaking noises rang out, as the Buddha statue suddenly moved to one side, revealing a pitch-black tunnel under the lotus throne. Lao Ai opened his eyes in astonishment. He lowered his voice and murmured, This is the method of the Jianghu. I've experienced it in the past as well. The method of the Jianghu? What a familiar name. Wu Qi bowed his head and squeezed out from under the offering table, raising his head to look at the Buddhist light barrier. As it could shield the sight of those outside, he was not afraid that Reverend San Lu would discover the anomaly in the hall. Wu Qi stuck his head out and gave the tunnel a glance. Suddenly, he laughed and said, Reverend Hidden Heart, I can't believe there is an escape tunnel in this hall of yours. Hidden Heart laughed dryly, then put his palms together and sighed under his breath, I'm ashamed. I've gone through 30 transmigrations, and I've lived 6 consecutive lives before this. Hee, I used to be a mountain bandit. Although I've converted to the Buddhist League in this life, I can never forget this life-saving method. He bowed his head and gave the tunnel a glance, then cried out in a low voice, Guarding Heart, bring everyone and leave this place at once. That demon Flaming Crow only has an ordinary magic power, and his flame can only reach 100 feet into the ground. However, after several hundred years of work, this tunnel of mine has gone about 1 mile deep into the ground, leading to Anhe City's Anlu village, 600 miles away from here. Bring everyone and leave this place at once. If I can survive today, I'll definitely come looking for you in the future. Old monk Hidden Heart was a bandit, a great bandit. Out of nowhere, Wu Qi felt a sense of closeness to the old monk. Yet, Guarding Heart could not bear to part with his master. He struggled to his feet, dropped to his knees and hugged the old monk's legs, weeping and refusing to leave. Wu Qi felt a heartache when he saw that. He could not help but shake his head, as he suddenly recalled something that happened a long time ago. You've saved my life, and it's only natural that I have to repay you. Wu Qi sighed, then fished out a large bag of drunken dragon incense from Black Dragon's spirit ring, which weighed about half a kilogram. He handed it over to Hidden Heart and said in a deep voice, This is an excellent knockout incense I've concocted using rare and precious spirit herbs I've gathered during my daily travels. Sprinkle it outside the entrance of the temple, then set it on fire. The aroma will fill the entire valley, and those people up there will have to surrender obediently. Guarding Heart was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he snatched the bag from Wu Qi's hand and sprinted out of the temple happily. Meanwhile, Hidden Heart was staring thoughtfully at Wu Qi, his pair of old eyes sizing up Wu Qi from head to toe. Wu Qi chuckled, his furtive eyes quickly glancing at Hidden Heart's waistband. There was a bulging pouch on it, which was the secret pouch used by Hidden Heart to keep all his belongings. When experts talked, there was no need for words. With just a slight movement or a glance, one could easily know the identity of the other party. Hidden Heart chuckled, then put his palms together at Wu Qi and said, No wonder fellow Taoist is being hunted by someone. Wu Qi laughed dryly, then said deliberately to disgust Hidden Heart, Same here. No wonder Grandmaster is hiding your heart here. Sitting in a corner of the temple, when Minhua saw Wu Qi hand over the drunken dragon incense to Guarding Heart, he suddenly cried out at the top of his voice, Patriarch, be careful. This group of bald donkeys and a few mongrel Taoists are going to use the sleeping incense to harm people. Patriarch, be careful. Both Wu Qi and Hidden Heart looked over at the same time. Casually, both of them picked up the most convenient thing in their hands and threw it forcefully towards Minhua. The thing Hidden Heart grabbed was the wooden pestle used to strike the wooden fish. It was as thick as an arm and thrust straight into Minhua's mouth along with a strong gust of wind, making him unable to utter a single word. The thing Wu Qi grabbed was the wooden fish about the size of a human head. Casually, he threw it out and forcefully hit Minhua's lower abdomen. The pain made Minhua's body twitch violently. However, as the wooden pestle was stuck in his mouth, he could neither inhale nor exhale, and was nearly suffocated to death. By then, Guarding Heart had already rushed out of the temple. The raging flame had pushed the Buddhist light to less than 100 feet away from the main entrance. Regardless of the consequences, Guarding Heart grabbed the drunken dragon incense packet and threw it out of the Buddhist light, easily throwing it several hundred feet away. As soon as the packet fell into the raging flame, it was burned into nothingness in just a blink of an eye. Invisible and colorless smoke spread out quickly, blanketing the entire valley in just a blink of an eye. The group of cultivators hovering in the air above the temple, laughing and cursing in an unbridled manner, only stayed in the smoke for less than a second before plummeting straight down from the sky like drunken wild ducks. Hidden Heart cried out, "Excellent!" at the top of his voice, then pulled out a 3 feet long, glinting blue knife from under his sleeve. He pressed his palm on the Buddha statues next to him, and the Buddhist light bursting out from them stopped abruptly. The group of over 30 cultivators tumbled and fell into the temple hall. Without the support of their magic power, their heads were badly battered and bleeding, and a few of them even had their arms broken when they knocked against the offering tables and Buddha statues. Wu Qi could even hear the sound of their bones breaking. "You bunch of filthy Taoists." Hidden Heart picked up the knife and walked angrily towards the unconscious Reverend Sanlo. "Today, I'm going to subdue all the demons and evils. I'm going to eradicate all of you evil Taoists." Wu Qi did not mind it at all. Seeing that Hidden Heart was about to break his abstinence and kill Reverend Sanlo, and since Reverend Sanlo was not a good person, he decided to just kill him. All of a sudden, a ring of Buddhist light burst out from under the offering table. Lao Ai sat cross-legged on a pink lotus throne, flying up into the sky with a solemn expression. The huge wheel of delight transformed into a magnificent golden color and hovered behind Lao Ai's back. There were no heavenly enchantresses on it, but countless flying apsaras, and the faint chanting of scriptures could be heard drifting out from time to time. "Wait, Hidden Heart. I still have a use for those evil Taoists." Lao Ai cried out in a deep voice, "Hidden Heart, I'm the incarnation of the blissful bodhisattva of bliss from the land of bliss. Over the past few months, I've purposely disguised myself as a Taoist in distress to test you. Fate has brought you and I together. Are you willing to become my disciple?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes and did not say another word. Meanwhile, Hidden Heart had long thrown himself to the ground and thrown himself on his knees. With a trembling voice, he cried out, "The blissful bodhisattva of bliss, the blissful bodhisattva of bliss, I'm willing to become your disciple." Clang! The knife in Hidden Heart's hand fell to the ground as he bounced and came next to Wu Qi's feet. Chapter 426. Wu Qi's divine will was shuttling back and forth in the hall as he quickly exchanged opinions with Lao Ai. "Why are you playing tricks on me? Don't forget that this old monk is your benefactor." Wu Qi glared at Lao Ai. "I'm used to having many followers around me, living a luxurious life, and living a luxurious life. Now that I've fallen into a dire situation, and even Great Sun's sect has been uprooted, I'm not used to not recruiting a few more disciples. As for this old monk, with my guidance, he will at least be able to attain the realm of Arhat in the future. What a lucky guy." Lao Ai smiled with a solemn expression. "Don't mess around. They are honorable monks, and you're not allowed to make them look like Great Sun sect's people." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a fierce glare once again. "Don't worry, I'll repay kindness with kindness and enmity with enmity." Since young, Lao Ai has always been able to distinguish between kindness and enmity. Lao Ai rolled his eyes at Wu Qi disapprovingly, then pressed his palm on Hidden Heart's head and said, "You and I are brought together by fate. Since you have joined my sect today, you will be my second eldest disciple. Circulate your cultivation base and focus your mind. I'll help you form your first lotus throne with the technique of enlightenment." A bright Buddhist light flickered around Lao Ai's body, while a warm stream rushed straight into Hidden Heart's head from his palm. The old monk let out a hearty laugh and sat on the ground with his legs crossed. A slit opened between his eyebrows, from which a thin white light flickered, and a thumb-sized Buddhist relic darted out of it, radiating a bright white light. Vaguely, the silhouette of swastikas and lotus flowers could be seen flickering in the relic, while a soft, tough, and pure Buddhist power spread out in all directions. Even Wu Qi could not help but calm his mind, and his spirit became clear and condensed. Lao Ai began to recite an incantation in a low voice while his fingers kept changing incantation gestures, injecting his enormous energy essence into Hidden Heart's body. A stream of white mist rose from between Hidden Heart's brows, gradually transforming into a clump of mist that took the shape of a lotus flower. Buddhist cultivators did not cultivate their Jin Dan, form their nascent soul, or form their nascent divinity. All their cultivation base was focused on the relic. A sarira was the amalgamation of all the essence, energy, and spirit of a Buddhist cultivator. Forming a relic was equivalent to the Taoist Jin Dan realm. After forming a relic, once the first lotus seat was formed, it would be the nascent soul realm. Once the second lotus seat was formed, it would be the nascent soul realm. Once the third lotus seat was formed, it would be the third lotus seat. Once the relic survived the heavenly tribulation, it would be the undying golden Arhat realm. After reaching the golden Arhat realm, the three lotus thrones gradually merged into one, and finally turned into a third-grade lotus thrones. Those who could sit on the lotus platform were bodhisattva meritorious fruits. That was the strength of a golden immortal of the Tao sections. The grade of the lotus throne would increase with the growth of one's cultivation base, from the 3rd grade to the 9th grade. Once a 9th grade golden lotus throne was formed, one would step into the realm of Buddha, which was equivalent to the strength of a primordial immortal in Tao League. The reason why Lao Ai helped Hidden Heart form the first relic lotus throne with his own energy essence was because he wanted to help Hidden Heart break through the nascent soul realm. An enormous amount of energy essence was constantly being injected into Hidden Heart's body. The old monk was drenched in sweat, and his fleshly body was radiating a strong golden light. His cultivation of the indestructible body of the Buddhist League was improving at an incredible speed, but he could not make a breakthrough in his realm. A stubborn threshold stood before the old monk. Although he had used all his Buddhist cultivation base and Lao Ai's energy essence, he just could not break through it no matter how hard he tried. Cold sweat kept trickling down Lao Ai's forehead. There was a price to pay for pretending to be mysterious. As he had not fully recovered from the serious injury, in order to subdue Hidden Heart, he had impersonated a bodhisattva and accepted the old monk as his disciple. He had forcefully injected a tiny bit of energy essence into the old monk to help him break through his realm. Initially, he thought that since the old monk's cultivation base was almost at the peak of the Jin Dan realm, it would be very easy for him to form the first lotus throne. Little did he expect that he would suffer a setback here. For Buddhist cultivators, the state of mind was the most important thing. If there was no mental obstacle, an ordinary old monk could become a Buddha within one day. However, if the mental obstacle was too strong, even after 100 reincarnations, he would only have the cultivation base of one relic. Hidden Heart had no idea what was bothering him in his heart, but it made his face turn purple, while Lao Ai's body was trembling. The first lotus throne of the relic was still in the shape of a faint mist, and no matter how hard he tried, he just could not form a corporeal body. Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. Rolling his eyes, he suddenly walked before Hidden Heart, roared with all his might like a lion, "Who are you sorry to?" Hidden Heart was in a state where he was on the verge of breaking through, yet he just could not. His mind was in a trance and hazy state. Upon hearing Wu Qi's roar, the old monk cried out instinctively, "I have wronged too many people. 30 reincarnations entangled me, wife, parents, countless favors and grudges. How could I just leave them behind?" Wu Qi gave Hidden Heart a tight slap on the face and scolded, "Idiot. No wonder even your Buddhist name is Hidden Heart. Hide your mother. Dig out your heart that has been reincarnated for 30 reincarnations and wash it under the sun. Let go of your past life, and let go of the mortal world. You have already jumped out of that filthy world, so why are you still hiding your filthy heart?" A series of slaps came raining down on Hidden Heart's face. The slaps made the old monk's face explode, and his face was covered with blood. "Hey!" cried Wu Qi. "Wake up! Let go of that hidden heart of yours. When you ascend to the realm of Bodhisattva, you can go and find their reincarnations. Repay kindness with kindness, and take revenge with revenge. Why are you still entangled here?" Hidden Heart's eyes suddenly lit up, and two beams of white light shot out into a far distance. Exerting all his spirit, energy, and soul, Wu Qi transformed them into a loud ringing that sounded like a huge bell and smashed into the bottom of Hidden Heart's heart. "How are you going to save others if you don't become a Buddha? A clay bodhisattva crossing a river can't even protect itself. In this mortal world, you can't even protect a small temple. Who can you save? Who can you help?" Lao Ai rolled his eyes and nodded as if he had understood something. Suddenly, Hidden Heart cried out the name of Buddha. Suddenly, his body burst into flames even though there was no flame. A seven-colored flame wheeled and burned around his body, sending forth a strong fragrance of sandalwood. After being burned by the flame, his old and shriveled body suddenly became tall and strong, glinting with a golden light. Just like that, he had become a monk in the prime of his youth. A sheet of white light wheeled above his head, while two white lotus flowers that looked like they were just plucked from a pond were blooming and fluttering in the wind. Abruptly, the relic of the old monk swelled up, hovering lightly between the two white lotuses. The bright light emitted by the relic shone on the two white lotuses, while wisps of mist sprayed out from the lotuses to nourish the relic. Both complemented each other, and vaguely, there was an endless stream of yin and yang of the Taiji principle of mutual generation and destruction. All of a sudden, a beam of white light burst out from the relic, amidst which, another white lotus flower was gradually taking shape. It looked like it was just a tiny bit away from taking a corporeal form. "Excellent! Excellent!" Wu Qi put his palms together and smiled at the old monk. "Now, Reverend, you are just one step away from becoming a gold arhat. With the epiphany, you will become an immortal and indestructible gold arhat. Congratulations, Reverend." Hidden Heart threw his head back and let out a joyful cry. Slowly, he rose to his feet and walked 3 rounds around Lao Ai, who was sitting cross-legged. After bowing respectfully to Lao Ai, he put his palms together and expressed his gratitude to Wu Qi, "Fellow Taoist, thank you for enlightening me. You have given me the lion's roar, and I have benefited a lot from it. With such a perceptive ability, you must have a fate with the Buddhist League." Wu Qi's expression changed abruptly. He gave Hidden Heart a fierce gaze and said with a cold snort, "Your whole family is fated with the Buddhist League." Waving his hand, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "Don't thank me. You should thank someone else. The words I enlightened you with are plagiarized from someone else. That man is fated with the Buddhist League, and his whole family is fated with the Buddhist League." With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Qi strode towards Reverend San Lu and his company, who had fallen to the ground. With a casual gesture, he snatched the storage ring from Reverend San Li's hand. Then, he sent his divine will into the ring, and Wu Qi could not help but frown. Was this still the new city lord of Anhe City? Why did he look so shabby? It was such a large storage ring, but he only found 3 upper-grade energy stones, tens of mid-grade energy stones, and several hundred lower-grade energy stones. Wasn't he too poor? On the other hand, there were a few bottles of pills, several dozens of spirit talismans of decent quality, and 3 flying swords of upper-grade magical item level. All these things could be considered to be of some value. But, if they were added together, the total value of Reverend San Li's assets was only about 3 to 500,000 lower-grade energy stones. What a shame that he was the city lord, and a cultivator of early-stage nascent soul realm. After carefully searching through Reverend San Li's body, Wu Qi took away all the valuables, including a belt made from cold centipede threads. After that, he kicked Reverend San Lu away, then sprinted towards Taoist Flaming Crow. Lao Ai finally reacted when he saw Wu Qi cleaning up Reverend San Li's belongings in a professional manner. Like a rooster whose neck was grabbed, he cried out at the top of his voice, "My disciple! Hidden Heart put his palms together respectfully and asked, "Master, your disciple is here. What can I do for you?" When Madman Shui heard Lao Ai's cry, he immediately leaped towards Taoist Flaming Crow like a hungry wolf pouncing on its prey. Before Wu Qi could reach him, Madman Shui had already thrown himself onto Taoist Flaming Crow's body, running both hands all over his body like a pervert who had just seen a beautiful lady. It was a very ambiguous posture. But, it was a pity that he was a professional. Madman Shui kept pressing and touching Taoist Flaming Crow's body, and in the end, he only managed to pull out a few red talismans. Meanwhile, Wu Qi casually rolled Taoist Flaming Crow's body and exercised the hand of web. In the next moment, an invisible airflow had coiled up 2 storage bracelets on Taoist Flaming Crow's wrists. Then, he sent his divine will into the bracelets, and Wu Qi immediately let out a few joyful laughs. Taoist Flaming Crow was quite wealthy. Although he did not have many energy stones, he had enough talismans, spirit pills, a complete set of magical items and formation flags, as well as fire element spirit herbs and minerals. All of them were enough to fill up 3 large rooms. Pleasantly surprised, Wu Qi praised, "That's more like it. The natural energy on Panga continent is many times denser than that of outer heavenly realms, and the natural resources are abundant as well. It is only right that he has such a wealth." Lao Ai's eyes were burning with jealousy. Hastily, he sent out a divine will and said, "Wu Qi, don't go too far. According to the rules of the martial world, a meeting is half done." Wu Qi was taken aback. Then, he turned and nodded at Lao Ai while baring his teeth and saying, "A meeting is half done. Once we've stripped all these guys, we'll go occupy Anhe City. Hee, let's go to Anhe City first and heal our wounds." Lao Ai was shocked. Occupy Anhe City? Min clan is supported by a heaven immortal. How do we have the overall strength to deal with a heaven immortal with our current strength? Wu Qi waved his hand disapprovingly and said coolly, "Just trust me." Madman Shui, come, take off this fellow's pants. I can't believe he is hiding a storage bag in his crotch. What kind of shameful thing is he hiding? Clothes were fluttering in the air inside the hall. Reverend Sanlu, Taoist Flaming Crow, and several dozens of cultivators were stripped naked. Just as Wu Qi was excitedly robbing these unlucky fellows, a hurried cry was suddenly heard coming from outside the valley. "Patriarch, hurry up and return to the city. Some bald donkeys from Golden Pavilion Temple are blocking the city gate." Chapter 427. Upon hearing the voice, Lao Ai's face fell. He casually pointed his finger at the ground, and the blade that Hidden Heart dropped just now transformed into a beam of green light and shot up into the sky, about to kill the disciple from Min clan who came to deliver the message. Wu Qi casually pointed his finger out, unleashing a grayish rune from his fingertip. It transformed into a twisting grayish mist that looked like a human face and slammed into the blade, knocking it 70 to 80 feet away and stabbing into one of the pillars of the Buddhist hall. Wu Qi smiled at Lao Ai and said, "This is the land of the Buddhist League. How can you just kill someone like that?" Lao Ai glared at him, then straightened his neck and said, "I'm the Bodhisattva of killing, and I specialize in protecting the righteousness of the mortal world by killing." Tisk, protecting the righteousness of the mortal world by killing? The hair on Wu Qi's neck stood up. How could you say something like that? Twitching his lips, Wu Qi moved his body. Noiselessly, 18 celestial fiend puppets walked out of Wu Qi's body, transforming into 18 shadows and plunging down into the bodies of Reverend Sanlu, Taoist Flaming Crow, and a few other cultivators with the strongest cultivation base. Min Hua, Min Yi, and the other men and women, who were squatting in a corner of the hall and saw everything clearly, were also possessed by the puppets after being knocked unconscious by Wu Qi with drunken dragon incense. A frightening sound of bones and flesh being chewed rang out from the bodies of these possessed cultivators. Dark smoke rose from their bodies, and before long, they opened their eyes and rose to their feet. Although they still looked like Reverend Sanlu and Taoist Flaming Crow, in fact, they had been replaced by celestial fiend puppets. It was an unorthodox mystic technique of the Fiend League found in the Celestial Fiend Battle the Heaven script, the puppet possession and soul-seizing grand magic. After being possessed by a Celestial Fiend puppet, the cultivator's cultivation base, spirit, and energy would be seized by the puppet, along with all their memories and knowledge. It was only after these Celestial Fiend puppets had transcended the heaven realm and transformed into fiend immortals that Wu Qi learned they had such a mystic technique. However, the conditions for using this secret technique were slightly harsh. It could only be used when the other party was completely defenseless. But, with the drunken dragon incense, Reverend San Lu and his company were no different from dead men, and it was easy for them to be possessed by celestial fiend puppets. A few red flame spots flickered in his eyes, as Fiery Crow Taoist pointed his finger at the air. Following his move, the fire calabash swayed down and fell into his hand. Fiery Crow Taoist rubbed his empty fingers, laughed embarrassedly, held his hands behind his back and stood behind Wu Qi. Wu Qi shoved everything in both storage bracelets into the Black Dragon spirit ring, then handed the empty storage bracelets back to the Flaming Crow Taoist. Meanwhile, Reverend San Lu and the other cultivators had retrieved their empty storage treasures from Wu Qi. Apart from the flying swords and magic treasures they carried with them, there was nothing left on their bodies. When everything was done, Reverend San Lu cleared his throat and said, "Why are you panicking? What is there to be confused about? What's the big deal? Aren't they just a few bald donkeys from Golden Pavilion Temple? I'll go back now and teach them a good lesson." Wu Qi fished out a few jade bottles filled with medicinal powder and liquid, concocting a pinch of the drunken dragon incense's antidote. After that, he asked Reverend San Lu to stuff some powder under the noses of each of the unconscious cultivators, waking them up. After that, Reverend San Lu displayed the awe-inspiring bearing of the patriarch, explaining that Wu Qi and his company had been subdued by him, and that all of them were willing to join Min clan in Anhui City and become its subordinates. After that, Reverend San Lu gave those cultivators, who were at a loss of what to do, a torrent of abuse. He scolded them for being a bunch of useless fools who were knocked unconscious by a single roar from Hidden Heart, and for bringing shame to Min clan for no reason. After that, he put on a show for a while, and finally managed to wrap up the whole thing. Unavoidably, Wu Qi had to ask Reverend San Lu to return those cultivators the storage bags and other things he seized just now. He could just assume that they had fallen into the hall after being knocked unconscious, and were snatched by Wu Qi. After struggling for a full 15 minutes, the group of cultivators, together with a disciple of Min clan who came to deliver the news just now, rose up on a cloud and flew towards Anhui City at top speed. Hidden Heart was long dumbfounded by Wu Qi's unimaginable means. But in front of Lao Ai, a living bodhisattva, and Wu Qi was his benefactor who had just helped him break through 2 realms, Hidden Heart had no choice but to keep his mouth shut, pretending that nothing had happened. He left the little monk, guarding Heart, in the temple to take care of the stuff, while he himself served Wu Qi and Lao Ai attentively, heading straight for Anhui City. The deep valley where the temple was located was less than 500 miles away from Anhui City. In the past, when Jing'an was the city lord, he often came to Hidden Heart Temple to discuss scriptures and dharma with him. Now, Hidden Heart had obtained a great opportunity, which nearly allowed him to become a gold arhat in just one step. On the other hand, Jing'an was dead, having his soul destroyed by the cultivators of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Looking at the city wall of Anhui City from afar, Hidden Heart could not help but sigh with mixed emotions. Anhui City was the largest city within an area of 100,000 miles circumference. A long time ago, it was the county mansion of Anlu County of Yu Dynasty. Later on, immortal sects gradually eroded the foundation of Anlu County, and the influence of the human emperor of Yu Dynasty was gradually driven out. Today, Anhui City had become an autonomous city. The ancient and simple Anhui City was surrounded by 6 rivers. 6 ribbons of green water flowed slowly around the city, bringing the fertile soil and a beautiful environment to the city. All the buildings in the city were simple, and heavy. Over 70% of them were constructed from huge, neatly carved boulders, and logs so thick that it would take a few men to wrap their arms around them. They looked magnificent, and gave off a sense of heaviness that would never change even after 10,000 years. These buildings were engraved with exquisite patterns, which added a bit of spiritual chi to these buildings, giving them a sense of vitality out of nowhere. Apart from these buildings, about 30% of them were extremely luxurious and exquisite. Strange and crafty techniques could be found everywhere in these buildings. Some of them were even propped up by various formations at great cost, making them hover in midair above the clouds 1,000 feet above the ground. The pavilions carved with gold and jade glinted brilliantly under the sunlight, forming a sharp contrast with those simple and unadorned buildings. After Anhi city was taken over by the immortal sects, these buildings were constructed by successive generations of city lords and immortal cultivators. Today, Anhi city was not only the economic center of Anlu County, but also the trading center for all the immortal cultivators within the area of 1 million mile circumference. Its status was similar to Green Cliff Immortal Market. The number of mortals living in the city exceeded 1 million, while the number of immortal cultivators, both permanently stationed and traveling in the city, added up to several tens of thousands of them. When Wu Qi and his company arrived near Anhi city on a cloud, they happened to see a tall and burly monk sitting cross-legged at each of the city's 4 city gates. Before each of them was a pestle that subdued evils, a wooden staff, an alms bowl, or a wooden fish. A few objects were emitting a faint golden gleam, which transformed into a faint golden beam from all 4 directions, completely enveloping the entire city. Although the golden beam looked very thin, it was actually very flexible. A few cultivators in the city attacked it with sword beams and magical treasures, but the backlash made them cough out blood. A large group of cultivators hovered in midair, staring at the golden beam without saying a word. Those who wished to enter the city from the outside would not be hindered by the golden beam, but those who wished to leave the city, whether they were mortals or cultivators, would be stopped by the golden beam at the city gate, unable to move. Next to each of the 4 monks was placed a huge water vat that could hold over 1,000 kilograms of water. The water vat was placed amidst the golden beam, and from time to time, some mortals would throw some gold grains, silver ingots, copper coins, and even some steamed buns and fried cakes into the vat. With that, they would be able to leave the city unhindered. Among them, one of the monks had gained the most. His large water vat was already half filled with gold, silver, copper coins, and all sorts of food. Wu Qi even saw 2 braised pig heads lying in the water vat with a big smile on their faces. Wu Qi had no idea who threw them into the vat. Reverend Sanlu did not move, and neither did Taoist Flaming Crow. However, the 4 monks turned to look at them from several tens of miles away. A loud Buddhist chant rang out, as the 4 monks cried out together, "We are the Dharma protectors of Golden Pavilion Temple. Today, we have come to Anhi city to beg for alms from fellow Taoists to recast the golden body of Buddha. We hope fellow Taoists can donate generously, as it will be a great merit." Wu Qi had already adjusted his visage slightly. Staring at the 4 monks, he cried out, "Masters, are you not here for the matter of Jade Pagoda Temple?" Wu Qi asked a question he already knew the answer to. How could the monks of Golden Pavilion Temple not be here for the matter of Jade Pagoda Temple when they suddenly blocked the city gate? Not only Jade Pagoda Temple, the Golden Pavilion Temple was also blocked by the guests of Lady Qiao from Euphoria Heavenly Palace, preventing the experts from leaving the temple. That was the reason why Jade Pagoda Temple was massacred by Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Because of the resentment in their hearts, the monks of Golden Pavilion Temple came here to stir up trouble after Reverend Sanlu took over the position of City Lord. Perhaps it was because the cultivation of those people behind Euphoria Heavenly Palace was too strong, and the Golden Pavilion Temple did not really want to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Therefore, these 4 monks just blocked the city gate and did not fight their way in. But then again, what these 4 monks had done was no different from directly bullying the Euphoria Heavenly Palace's gate. Nevertheless, they did not resort to any violent means. If Euphoria Heavenly Palace were to overreact, perhaps Golden Pavilion Temple would seize the opportunity to launch an attack. After all, a few of Lady Qiao's bedmates were only blocking the front door of Golden Pavilion Temple, and did not help her destroy it. Obviously, either Lady Qiao was not worthy enough for her lover to sacrifice himself like this, or the backer of Golden Pavilion Temple was strong enough. Now that Golden Pavilion Temple had put on a disgusting attitude, they wanted to see how Euphoria Heavenly Palace would react. After a brief moment of pondering, Wuqi laughed and asked, "The current city lord of Anhe City, Reverend Sanlu, is here. Masters, can we enter the city?" One of the monks gave Reverend Sanlu a deep look, then nodded and said, "You can enter the city, but as for leaving the city, you have to befriend the Buddhist League." With a thought in Wuqi's mind, Reverend Sanlu suddenly laughed coldly and said, "Follow me in." A few bald donkeys are nothing to me. Let's enter the city first, then we'll settle the score with them later. Riding on a cloud, the company easily broke through the golden barrier and entered the city. The four monks glanced at Hidden Heart, wondering why there was a monk among Wuqi and his company. However, it was obvious that they did not know Hidden Heart, as they just remembered his face and let him enter the city. There were countless Buddhist monks and itinerant cultivators on Panga continent, so it was reasonable for Reverend Sanlu to have a few good friends who were monks. Right after they entered the city, a group of cultivators with cultivation bases ranging from early-stage nascent soul realm to early-stage Jin Dan realm rushed up to them anxiously. Among them, a white-clothed scholar with the strongest cultivation base, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator, pointed his finger at Reverend Sanlu and cried out sternly, "Sanlu, I don't care what Euphoria Heavenly Palace is doing, you can't delay our business. A few of our elders are here for an inspection, but they are blocked by these monks in the city. This is a grudge between Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple. Don't drag us into it." The white-clothed scholar raised his head and looked at the sun, then said angrily, "I'll give you 15 minutes. If our elders still can't leave the city by then, I'll move all the shops in our sect to Hehe City, and let Euphoria Heavenly Palace and those mortals collect taxes." Wuqi's heart gave a slight jerk. He could not accept this. If these immortal sect's shops ran away, what would he gain by occupying Anhe City? Chapter 428. Although the celestial fiend puppets had possessed Reverend Sanlu and occupied Anhe City, Wuqi just wanted to find a place to heal his wounds in peace, and at the same time collect a batch of Panga continent's resources. This place was the primeval heaven and earth created by the great Saint Pangu since the ancient times. It had all sorts of resources, and the outer heavenly realms that were scattered could not compare with it. On top of that, Wuqi also wanted to use Anhe City to find out the current map of Panga continent. Yes, a map. Although the Scroll of Stealing had recorded a few locations where innate yang energy could be found, as Panga continent was constantly absorbing chaotic airflows to expand its body, the shadowy figure who left behind the Scroll of Stealing was a figure who lived many eons ago. The current Panga continent was many times larger than the one recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, and its topography had changed greatly as well. Without a complete map of Panga continent, where was Wuqi going to find those places where innate yang energy could be found? Although he did not take Euphoria Heavenly Palace seriously, nor did he take a small city like Anhe City seriously, it was still the first power that Wuqi came into contact with after he entered Panga continent. If he could control it, it would be beneficial for him to gather all sorts of information about Panga continent, especially the current map of Panga continent, as well as all sorts of news. As he had already considered Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Anhe City as his possessions, there was no way Wuqi could let the immortal sect represented by the white-clothed scholar leave Anhe City and develop elsewhere. Under his control, Reverend Sanlu quickly slapped his chest and promised, "Rest assured, fellow Taoist, we'll get rid of those monks who blocked the entrance immediately." Please be patient, fellow Taoist. Euphoria Heavenly Palace will surely compensate us for delaying the journey of a few elders of your sect. Reverend Sanlu flew forward, trying to rope them in, promising them, befriending them, and threatening them in a low voice. Finally, he managed to calm the chaotic crowd of cultivators. After that, Wuqi's face darkened, and he was about to go out and break the bald heads of the four monks. Regardless of the enmity between Golden Pavilion Temple and Euphoria Heavenly Palace, it would be your fault if you delayed Wuqi's matter. While he was about to strike, a loud and clear laugh was heard coming from an exquisite restaurant constructed with pale yellow fragrant wood and pale green jade bricks. Reverend Sanlu is really unwise. Golden Pavilion Temple is going against the trend, and this is a great opportunity for us. Could it be that Reverend Sanlu is planning to drive them away and settle this matter? Along with that laughter, an 8 feet tall, handsome, and elegant young man, dressed in white clothes and holding a jade folding fan in his hand, slowly walked to the balcony of the restaurant. He was in high spirits and had a temperament that made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. He unfolded the folding fan and waved it lightly, then pointed at Reverend Sanlu and cried out, "How could Reverend Sanlu not take advantage of such a good opportunity to build a great contribution? How stupid are you?" Tisk, tisk. Wu Qi smacked his lips. Why did this scene sound so familiar to him? An almighty scholar with 1,000,000 armored soldiers hiding in his heart would always do the strange things that an almighty man should do in a busy market, say the bold words that an almighty man should say, and insult the master he had chosen. After that, he would become a legend that could be passed down through the ages. Of course, there would always be an interlude before this scene, just like what was happening right now. Upon hearing the white-clothed young man scolding their patriarch, the cultivators from Min clan immediately snapped angrily. Reverend San Li's 2 great-grandsons even pointed their fingers out, unleashing 2 streams of pinkish smoke that transformed into 2 sword beams and thrust towards the white-clothed young man. But, the white-clothed young man raised his head and stared at Reverend Sanlu fearlessly as he cried out, "Reverend, are you really going to miss this rare opportunity? If you want to put on an act, I'll accompany you." Wu Qi was laughing in his mind. Reverend Sanlu casually extended his hand and caught the 2 sword beams in his palm. At the same time, the white-clothed young man was rolled up by an invisible force, flying up into the sky and hovering in front of Reverend Sanlu. Laughing hideously, Reverend Sanlu fiddled with the sword beams in his hand, then came before the young man and said in a low voice, "If you have any brilliant plan that you want to offer me, tell me now. If you hide anything from me, don't blame me. Among my sons, grandsons, and good friends, there are a few who like a handsome man like you." The young man's expression flickered slightly. If Reverend Sanlu had threatened to kill him, he would not have been afraid, as he had long expected such a threat. But, when Reverend Sanlu threatened him with such a despicable method, his heart skipped a beat, and his mind was filled with anxiety. With some difficulty, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said with a dry laugh, "Reverend, please." Standing aside, Wu Qi was grinning coldly as he cursed in his mind, "Keep pretending. Keep pretending." Reverend Sanlu chuckled. Suddenly, he reached out his hand and touched the young man's face. "You have such a delicate skin, and you are so handsome." If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I've always been close to women, don't blame me for eating you alive." The young man, who had been forcing himself to stay calm a moment ago, was thrown into a complete panic. Beads of sweat were dripping down his forehead, and his face was alternating between green and pale. He could no longer maintain the calm demeanor of an eminent scholar. Trembling, he bowed his head, forced himself to calm down and said with a dry voice, "There are too many people here. Reverend, please find me a quiet place and let me tell you everything." Reverend Sanlu chuckled like a hen laying eggs once again, "All right, I have high hopes for you. If I'm not satisfied with what you've told me, don't blame me for, A few other cultivators from Min clan, who were possessed by fiend immortals, let out evil laughs at the same time. They ran their lustful eyes across the young man's body, smacking their lips and murmuring under their breath, such as "fair skin" and "perky buttocks," which made the young man wish he could bang his head against a wall and kill himself. Amidst the wild laughter, Reverend Sanlu cupped his fist at the surrounding cultivators, who had unsightly expressions on their faces. Then, riding on a pink cloud, they sped towards a mansion located right in the center of Anhui City. The mansion was the residence of all the previous city lords of Anhui City. The previous city lord was Jing'an, the monk from Jade Pagoda Temple. Therefore, a 13-story pagoda was built behind the mansion using jade bricks. However, the pagoda had been completely razed to the ground, leaving only jade bricks scattered messily on the ground. A spacious hall was being built on the remains of the pagoda, and many craftsmen and servants were busy working on it. Reverend Sanlu sat loftily in the great hall, while Wu Qi and Lao Ai casually picked a seat and sat down, while the rest of the people stood around the hall. Everyone stared at the white-clothed young man with bright eyes, like a group of hungry tigers staring at a pitiful little lamb. Some of them even had a trace of strange pink in their eyes, causing the white-clothed young man to tremble like a fallen leaf in the wind. What kind of extraordinary demeanor was that? All of it had turned into a pie on a painting. Reverend Sanlu sat down on a chair and pointed his finger at the young man as he cried out, "Name, background, hometown, how many parents do you have, how many brothers and sisters do you have, how many livestock do you have, how many chickens, ducks, pigs, and dogs do you have? If you dare to deceive me, I'll go to your clan and wipe out your entire clan. As the saying goes, not even a chicken or a dog will be spared. I'll definitely kill every single one of you." Cold sweat dripped from the forehead of the white-robed young man as he stammered out these words. The young man's name was Lu Yi. He had no parents, and no relatives. He was an orphan who survived the massacre of an entire city, and was adopted by his master, a mysterious hermit who lived in a mountain. This nameless hermit was well versed in astronomy and geography, and when it came to the art of commanding armies and managing a kingdom, there was nothing he did not know and was an expert in. Since he was young, Louis had been learning all sorts of knowledge from the hermit. When the hermit died of old age 3 years ago, he buried him and left the mountain to travel the world, searching for the wise master in his heart. But this time, when he heard that Euphoria Heavenly Palace had defeated Jade Pagoda Temple and Reverend Sanlu was appointed as the city lord of Anhe City, Louis felt that Reverend Sanlu was a worthy target for him to assist. Therefore, he deliberately sought refuge with Reverend Sanlu, preparing to pour in all his efforts and make Reverend Sanlu a great contribution. Upon hearing Lu Yi's words, Wu Qi could not help but clench his jaws. Lao Ai's voice was heard ringing in his ears. In the past, when those hanger-ons sought refuge with their master, they would boast the same thing. Lao Ai had seen this kind of trick many times over the years. This man has the style of Yu Academy. Lao Ai nodded at Wu Qi meaningfully. Wu Qi nodded at Lao Ai and smiled knowingly. Both men exchanged a deep glance, then turned to look at Lu Yi at the same time. Reverend Sanlu answered with a noncommittal grunt, then shook his head and said, "You have no parents, no relatives, so you're not afraid that I'll wipe out your entire clan? Well, cut the crap. What kind of bullshit plan do you have to help me seize this golden opportunity and make me a great contribution? If you make me happy, you'll get fine wine, beautiful women, glory, splendor, wealth and rank. If you make me unhappy, you'll get 1,000 burly men to serve you. You can figure it out yourself." Lao Ai gave Wu Qi a strange look and asked with a voice transmission, "Are you really not acquainted with Duke of Longyang?" Wu Qi's face fell instantly. Fiercely, he made a gesture of cutting his neck at Lao Ai. Lu Yi could be considered as a formidable man. After the initial shock, he had become much calmer now. He forced himself to ignore the question about 1,000 burly men, clenched his jaws and said, "The destruction of Jade Pagoda Temple by Euphoria Heavenly Palace has caused the balance of powers within 1,000,000 miles around Anhe City. Reverend, with you guarding Anhe City, if you can seize the opportunity and stir up an all-out war between Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple, attracting the few experts behind Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple, making them both suffer a great loss in the fight. With that, there is a very high possibility that you can replace both Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple in one fell swoop." Reverend Sanlu was struck dumb, then suddenly burst into laughter and said, "Ridiculous. With my cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm, I can replace both of them." Lu Yi took a step forward, staring at Reverend Sanlu as he cried out, "If all the other immortal sects are involved in this conflict, how much further can your cultivation base improve?" "This." Reverend Sanlu frowned as he stared at Lu Yi and said with a cold grin, "Don't tell me you can help me achieve a meteoric rise? Louis smiled reservedly and said, I can't achieve meteoric rise, but it is more than enough for me to become a heaven immortal. Reverend, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Wu Qi crossed his legs and tilted his head to look at Louis. Reverend Sanlu pondered for a brief moment, then nodded slowly and said, Fine, tell me your plan. If it succeeds. Louis bowed deeply and said, If it succeeds, Reverend, I just need you to promise me one thing. That is to help me kill the murderers who massacred the city where my parents lived and killed them. Reverend Sanlu pretended to ponder for a while, then nodded and promised. Chapter 429. Merciful Buddha. Wu Qi put his palms together and bowed to the monk who sat at the east gate of Anhe City, then threw 2 pig heads, 3 pig livers, and 4 pig trotters into the water vat next to the monk. The monk opened his eyes, his mouth twitching as he nodded at Wu Qi and said, Benefactor. Merciful Buddha. Excellent. Excellent. While the monk was thinking about the pig heads and other things thrown into the water vat by Wu Qi suddenly reached out his hand, grabbed an old prostitute who looked to be at least 50 years old, and threw her into the vat. The monk trembled and opened his mouth abruptly, staring blankly at Wu Qi, unable to say a word for a long while. Wu Qi put his palms together and bowed to the monk once again, then said, I paid a huge sum of money to redeem this girl, intending to bring her home as my concubine. But when I met you today, I suddenly understood the wonderful principle of lasciviousness being the worst of all evils. I've decided to turn over a new leaf, and no longer engage in that despicable business. This girl is fated with the Buddhist League. Please accept her, Reverend. Leisurely nodding at the monk, Wu Qi pulled Louis, whose facial muscles were almost cramping from holding his breath. Slowly, both men walked out of the golden Buddhist light, walking along the main road towards a stretch of forest several hundred miles east of Anhe City. Suddenly, the monk cried out, Benefactor. Benefactor. Please wait. Meanwhile, the old prostitute, who was fed by Wu Qi with gold leaves and silver ingots, scrambled out of the water vat, threw her arms around the monk, and cried out, Reverend, please don't leave me behind. The fate between me and Reverend is something that happened in my previous life, the life before that, over 1,000 reincarnations, and after breaking several tens of thousands of wooden fishes before the Buddha. Reverend, please don't leave me behind. Several thousand cultivators in the city who were watching the scene burst out laughing. Some cultivators with weak cultivation base laughed so hard that they fell to the ground with their arms around their stomachs. Meanwhile, Lao Ai, who was watching Wu Qi's every move from the top of the city gate, put on a long face and cursed under his breath, this guy is still as shameless as before. TSK, speaking of which, I've suffered some losses in his hands, and I've been humiliated a few times. What exactly is his cultivation base? Madman Shui said with a dry voice, Master, Wu Qi is not afraid of people because of his cultivation base, but he is unscrupulous and shameless when dealing with people. That is the scariest thing. If he wants to go out of the city to settle some business, so be it, but he even wants to play with a monk. TSK, we are now. Lao Ai's face twitched a few times, then he breathed out a heavy sigh and nodded his head grimly. Lu Yi and Wu Qi walked at a fast pace. When they were tens of miles away from Anhe City, Wu Qi pulled Lu Yi up and flew eastward like a gust of strong wind. Lu Yi stared blankly at Wu Qi, then suddenly shook his head and said, Fellow Taoist greed, you really don't have to use such a trick to deal with that monk from Golden Pavilion Temple. Wu Qi stared coldly at Lu Yi, then suddenly laughed and said, Of course, I have my reasons for doing that. Shaking his head, Wu Qi said, Reverend San Lu is a heroic man, and it is the hope of all the people for him to be in charge of Anhe City. It is a great honor for greed to be able to follow Reverend San Lu. How dare those few bald donkeys embarrass Reverend San Lu? If I don't teach them a lesson, they will look down on us. It's just a small trick. It's nothing, nothing. Laughing, Wu Qi stared at Lu Yi and said provocatively, I've avenged Reverend San Lu, and now, I'm waiting to see your great plan, Brother Lu Yi. Lu Yi's expression changed abruptly. Staring coldly at Wu Qi, he sneered and said, "So, fellow Taoist greed, you think I'm a threat to your position in Anhe City?" Elegantly, he opened the folding fan and waved it, then raised his head and said, "Unless fellow Taoist greed has the courage to kill me right now, I will definitely become a lord in Anhe City who stands above all the people." A ferocious gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. He gave Lu Yi a fierce glare and cried out in a tone that was tough on the outside but cowardly on the inside, "Do you really think I don't have the courage to kill you? As long as I find that there's something wrong with you, that monk just now will be a warning to you." Lu Yi smirked and turned his head to look elsewhere. When Wu Qi saw the disapproving look that flashed in Lu Yi's eyes, he breathed out a sigh of relief in his heart. He laughed dryly, then suddenly asked, "Brother Lu Yi, since you dared to talk to Reverend Sanlu like that, aren't you afraid that Reverend Sanlu will reveal your great plan to Euphoria Heavenly Palace, and hand you over to Euphoria Heavenly Palace for a reward?" Lu Yi turned his head and gave Wu Qi a glance, a mocking smile on his face as he continued waving the folding fan in a carefree manner. He was too lazy to answer Wu Qi's question. In Lu Yi's eyes were a mixture of mockery, disdain, and a haughtiness that showed he had surpassed Wu Qi in terms of intelligence, causing him to regard Wu Qi as an idiot. Wu Qi laughed immediately. He had gotten the answer he wanted. After the celestial fiend puppet devoured all of Reverend Sanli's memories, Wu Qi knew that Reverend Sanlu was not favored by Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Instead, he was the kind of unlucky fellow who was always bullied and exploited. It was a mission where the risk outweighed the reward. The city lord of Anhe City was facing a great risk, as he could be assassinated at any time. On the other hand, his mission was to help Euphoria Heavenly Palace collect the taxes in Anhe City, and none of the taxes belonged to Reverend Sanlu. Reverend Sanlu had a great resentment toward Euphoria Heavenly Palace, and apart from that, he also had some unknown feelings toward the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Lady Qiao. It was not hard to imagine that when Lu Yi presented a seemingly flawless plan to Reverend Sanlu would definitely accept his brilliant plan, dragging Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple into a great war, and then allowing him to reap the benefits. This was the conclusion Wu Qi came to after the celestial fiend puppet devoured all of Reverend Sanli's memories. Yet, since Lu Yi dared to approach Reverend Sanlu and propose such a plan, it showed that his understanding of Reverend Sanlu was not weaker than Reverend Sanlu himself. With Lu Yi's background as an orphan disciple of a hermit, how could he know so many things when he had just arrived in Anhe City? Therefore, there must be someone behind him. They had spent a long period of time investigating Reverend Sanlu, and had come up with a thorough plan. Therefore, Wu Qi was very interested in the person behind Lu Yi. Meanwhile, Wu Qi, Lao Ai, Madman Shua, and Hidden Heart, the old monk who had returned to his youth, were all unfamiliar cultivators who suddenly appeared beside Reverend Sanlu. Unknowingly, Wu Qi and his company had become a variable in the minds of Lu Yi and his people. Variables were always dangerous, and Wu Qi did not want to put himself in danger for no reason. Therefore, he seized the opportunity to show Lu Yi that he was a petty itinerant cultivator who liked to fight for power and profit, a calculative itinerant cultivator, a man who had just joined Reverend Sanli's side, and was preparing to make a fortune or do some other shady business with the help of Reverend Sanlu, an itinerant cultivator with an overall strength of only early-stage Jin Dan realm. Obviously, Wu Qi had played this role very well with the petty tricks he used just now. As a result, Lu Yi no longer had his guard up against Wu Qi. As for what those people behind Lu Yi would think, Wu Qi naturally had a way to deal with them slowly. In short, Wu Qi found this game very interesting. Therefore, he wanted to play it to his heart's content, and find out what those people behind Lu Yi and his company were planning to do. Perhaps, this was an opportunity for him to officially merge with Panga Continent? Wearing a familiar obscene smile on his face, Wu Qi chuckled. A strong wind rolled up Lu Yi and brought him flying towards a lofty mountain several hundred miles to the east. Following Lu Yi's directions, Wu Qi traveled through the woods with gentle slopes. After flying for about 300 miles, Wu Qi brought Lu Yi into a real mountain range. They were surrounded by towering peaks and bottomless abysses, and the natural energy here was much denser than the outside world. Pangu continent truly deserved to be called the origin of all living beings. The natural energy here was nearly 100 times denser than that of myriad immortals' planet. As far as the naked eyes could see, exotic flowers and plants could be seen everywhere, and many of them were rare and precious materials that could be used to concoct immortal pills and spirit medicines. However, according to the confession obtained from Yu Huan, the Celestial Court and Yu Dynasty had a very strict watch over all the cultivators from outer heavenly realms entering and leaving Pangu continent. Apart from the fact that the Celestial Court could plunder all kinds of rare and precious materials from Pangu continent without any scruples, and the Yu Dynasty could sell all kinds of spirit herbs and precious products to cultivators at a high price through official channels, if any cultivators from outer heavenly realms dared to plunder spirit herbs and excavate ores in Pangu continent on a large scale, they would be severely punished by both the Celestial Court and Yu Dynasty. In the territories of immortal sects that were born and bred on Pangu continent, spirit herbs and other resources were almost fully harvested, just like the outer heavenly realms. The territories under the control of Yu Dynasty were filled with all kinds of spirit herbs, but as they were all controlled by the officials of Yu Dynasty, who would dare to touch them? Even though the regions around Anhui city had been invaded by immortal sects, and most of the official forces of Yu Dynasty had withdrawn from this region, the various prohibitions imposed by Yu Dynasty still had a deterrent force that could strike fear into people's hearts. Yet, not many people dared to harvest the spirit herbs as they pleased, fearing that a careless mistake would attract the army of Yu Dynasty and bring a devastating disaster to themselves or their sections. Following the cloud path through the mountains, they traveled for over 1,000 miles. Suddenly, Louis cried out, "Stop! Stop! It's just nearby." Wu Qi suppressed the gale, grabbed Louis, and came to the top of a slanting peak. This slanting peak was actually a mountain ridge that stood at an angle, standing 100,000 feet tall and shaped like a penholder. It was about 100 feet in width and nearly 10,000 feet in length, hanging in midair like a Rui scepter. The mountain ridge was entirely dark green in color. The side facing upward was fully covered with black rock ears, while the side facing downward was covered with wisterias that preferred the shade. At the place where the mountain ridge connected with the main peak, there was a rock that looked like a Ganoderma, about 100 feet in circumference. Louis pointed at the rock and said, "It's right there. It's right there. Go there now. As long as we have this thing, Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple will fight each other to the death." Wu Qi threw Lu Yi to the top of the slanting peak, then he himself slid towards the rock. He pulled out a lower-grade flying sword that he snatched from others and chopped off all the wisterias around the rock. Gradually, the rock revealed its true form. It was a Ganoderma that measured over 100 feet in circumference, and was entirely dark purple in color, nearly crystallized. A Ganoderma like this had lost its vitality, and could no longer contain any medicinal strength. However, in the core of this enormous crystallized Ganoderma, through its transparent body, Wu Qi could see a 3 feet in diameter spherical space. This spherical space was filled with a purple liquid, within which, a palm-sized, small, an adorable white horse was hovering quietly in the liquid. "This is..." Wu Qi took a deep breath. Louis gave Wu Qi a quick and mocking glance, then said with an indifferent tone, "It's just a Ganoderma horse condensed from the vital essence of a Ganoderma immortal who failed to transcend the tribulation." Chapter 430. A Ganoderma immortal was an old Ganoderma that had grown up and cultivated into an immortal. Compared to heaven immortals, demon immortals, ghost immortals, and fiend immortals, Ganoderma immortals were the most popular type of immortals, and enjoyed a good reputation in all the worlds. Firstly, Ganoderma immortals were not good at fighting. Apart from the earth and would escape arts that they were naturally proficient in, they basically did not know any offensive magic. Secondly, Ganoderma immortals were very useful. Basically, Ganoderma immortals were all-purpose spirit herbs. No matter if one was injured in the fleshly body, soul, internal or external injuries, poisoned, or sick, with just a tiny bit of flesh and blood taken from a Ganoderma immortal, they would be able to fully recover. Furthermore, the thing that made immortal Ganoderma so popular among all the immortals and other living beings in the world was its mild medicinal effect. As long as one could capture an immortal Ganoderma, there was no need to concoct it with seasonings. They could simply swallow it alive, and they would be able to obtain the energy essence and cultivation base that the immortal Ganoderma had cultivated for countless years without any side effects. Even if a mortal swallowed a Ganoderma immortal who was as strong as a gold immortal, he could still step into the realm of gold immortal in just a few months. Therefore, on Pangu continent and even in the celestial court, apart from some Ganoderma immortals who had extremely strong backers who could live safely in luxuriously decorated palaces and pavilions, where they would donate their blood for free every 300 to 500 years and have their backers concoct all sorts of spirit pills and medicines for them, wild Ganoderma immortals would basically be devoured by humans or some other living beings right after they showed their faces. Who would let go of such a great opportunity to rise to the top in a single bound? The crystallized Ganoderma in front of Wu Qi measured about 100 feet in circumference, and it had been growing for an unknown period of time. Unfortunately, he did not know when he was transcending his thunder tribulation, and his sentience was accidentally killed by the thunder tribulation, causing him to restrain all his energy essence and give birth to this Ganoderma horse. On the other hand, the Ganoderma horse was gradually absorbing the natural energy, eventually forming into an unprecedentedly crystallized Ganoderma horse. Ha! Wu Qi exerted the strength that was roughly equivalent to that of a Jin Dan cultivator and smashed his fist onto the Ganoderma horse. A crisp sound echoed out as Wu Qi's palm bounced back 2 feet high. He felt a dull pain in his palm, but the Ganoderma horse was not damaged at all. Wu Qi looked at the crystallized Ganoderma in surprise. He took out a flying sword and hacked at the Ganoderma a dozen times. However, the sword light shot out in all directions and sparks flew in all directions. Not a single mark was left on the Ganoderma. Louis crawled up the slanting peak while trembling. He stood up, waved his folding fan and laughed arrogantly, "Don't waste your energy. This immortal Zoisha is definitely not an ordinary heaven immortal, so there's no way you can open its true form. If it was so easy to open this Ganoderma and take out the Ganoderma horse, I would have long consumed the Ganoderma fluid beside the Ganoderma horse. Although it can't make me immortal, it can at least prolong my lifespan." Looking at Lu Yi in astonishment, Wu Qi sneered and said, "I can't tell that you don't have high expectations. Just the Zoisha liquid is enough to satisfy you." Lu Yi glanced at Wu Qi disdainfully. He patted the Ganoderma and said lightly, "You don't even know this? I'm a member of the human race. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are all part of the heavenly Tao. It's fine for me to prolong my lifespan, but consuming the Ganoderma horse and becoming an immortal? That goes against the commandment of the human race." With a flicker in his eyes, Wu Qi compared the confession he obtained from Yu Hehuan, and he could not help but nod his head silently. It was true that the human race was not allowed to cultivate and become an immortal. Furthermore, the human race could really resist the temptation of immortality after becoming an immortal. Very few of them would step onto the path of immortal cultivation for the sake of immortality. Perhaps this was the source of the secret conflict between the celestial court and the human race. Wu Qi smiled sheepishly and cast away these questions that were still far away from him. He pointed his finger at the cliffs on both sides. Immediately, large clusters of wisterias crawled over slowly, covering the crystallized Ganoderma completely. After that, he pulled Lu Yi up and flew towards Anhe City on a strong wind. "What you said is true. Hehe, with this Ganoderma horse, we can definitely drag Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple into a great war." Staring at Lu Yi, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "But, you haven't given us a plan on how to eradicate those immortal sections." Lu Yi waved his folding fan and said with a cold grin, "What do you know? My master is a man with a broad mind, and his plan is more than enough to travel unhindered between the heaven and earth. As long as Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple start a war because of this Ganoderma horse, the other immortal sects will be dragged into the war when they hear the news. On the other hand, as long as we construct the 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation, taught by Master here, no matter how many cultivators come, we will kill them all. Once we kill all the cultivators within 1 million mile circumference, we will surely succeed. Lu Yi's eyes flickered with excitement and fanaticism. Wu Qi just grinned coldly and did not respond to him. Suddenly, a few burly young men clad in green clothes slowly revealed themselves on the cliff. One of them, who was obviously the leader, crossed his arms before his chest and said with a low laugh, "Lu Yi, this pretty boy, is not bad. He has really convinced that Reverend Sanlo. TSK, this is going to be fun." The other few young men chuckled at the same time, murmuring under their breaths. The general idea was, after wasting the energy left behind by such a rare Ganoderma immortal after transcending his tribulation, it would be a great loss for them if they could only deal with Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple. No matter what, they had to turn Anhi City upside down, dragging all the powers behind Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple into this, and wipe them all out in one fell swoop. The leading young man tilted his neck, gently stroking the crystallized Ganoderma immortal as he murmured, "Anlu County. TSK, I can take back Anlu County from my hands, and teach those immortal sects who dared to invade the land of Dayu a hard lesson. I suppose my contribution this time is enough for me to be conferred the title of Marquis, right? He, Master Yu is the one who taught me the best. How could I have so many ideas in the past?" Upon hearing the name, Master Yu, the faces of the other few young men turned serious immediately. Their eyes shone with the same excitement and fanaticism as Lu Yi. Chi answered. After discussing the details of the operation in a low voice, the few young men whistled at the same time. Suddenly, a few huge black eagles, each with a wingspan of over 300 feet, swooped down from the sky. They leaped up and mounted the eagles, whistling excitedly as they drove them westward. When the few young men had gone far away, a stream of earth and mist suddenly sprayed out from near the Ganoderma. The yellowish mist wiggled for a while, and then Wu Qi walked out from it. Clapping his hands delightedly, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "Fortunately, all 18 celestial fiend puppets are my clones. Otherwise, I would have let go of such a precious treasure. This is a Ganoderma immortal after he failed to transcend his tribulation, and its divine sense was destroyed by the heavenly thunder, while its energy essence was restrained." After exclaiming for a while, Wu Qi carefully placed both palms on the Ganoderma, then gently released a thread of innate wood element energy and sent it into the Ganoderma. Suddenly, the Ganoderma immortal inside the Ganoderma emitted a faint green glow, which resonated with the innate wood element energy sent into it by Wu Qi. Gradually, the Ganoderma immortal's body became brighter, and a faint fragrance was slowly wafting out from the depths of the Ganoderma. This is not an ordinary heaven immortal, but the essence left behind by a middle-grade heaven immortal who failed to transcend his tribulation. Perhaps it is a 10th-tier heaven immortal. Oh my! If I can obtain the innate yang energy and cultivate an innate nascent divinity, with the power of this Ganoderma immortal and the Ganoderma liquid, I will definitely be able to transform my 7 stealing heaven meridians into chaotic stealing heaven meridians, and transform my fleshly body into an innate spirit body. At that point, all the magical abilities found in the scroll of stealing will be truly unlocked to me. Saliva nearly dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Wu Qi licked his lips, his eyes darting from side to side. Suddenly, he grinned coldly and said, "Fine, let's set each other up." A bright green light burst out from Wu Qi's body, as he had injected nearly all the innate wood element energy in his body into the Ganoderma immortal's body. Suddenly, the hazy Ganoderma immortal in the core of the Ganoderma immortal's body moved. Together with all the Ganoderma liquid around it, it transformed into a stream of green energy and shot out, flying quickly towards Wu Qi's body. At this moment, Wu Qi dared not to let this rare and precious natural treasure go to waste. Without hesitation, he took out a few pill bottles of the highest quality he found in Song Ao Immortal Abode, shoving the fist-sized Ganoderma Immortal Horse and nearly 50 kilograms of Ganoderma liquid into them, then threw them all into the Dark Yin energy vase. With the nourishment from the acquired water of pure yin contained in the dark yin energy vase, the Ganoderma horse and the Ganoderma liquid would not be harmed by anything. Instead, they would receive the help from the acquired energy contained in the spirit water, which would make the Ganoderma horse and the Ganoderma liquid grow stronger and stronger. Grinning coldly, Wuqi glanced left and right, then suddenly reached his hand into the spirit breeding ring and pulled out a 2-foot-long big radish. This big radish was one of the crops grown by the people of Longbow Kingdom in the spirit breeding ring. With a casual shake of his hand, Wuqi crushed the radish into pieces, leaving only the core and the whitest and juiciest radish flesh, which transformed into a fair and tender horse-shaped statue that looked exactly like the Ganoderma horse. After that, he took out several tens of kilograms of drunken dragon incense, and from the dark yin energy vase, he took out several tens of kilograms of transforming yin water, which had the magical effect of corroding the fleshly body of immortal cultivators. Wuqi mixed these two vicious things together, then used the yin thunder technique found in the dark yin water scripture to inject 3 yin thunderbolts into the transforming yin water. After that, he imitated what he had done earlier, and protected by the innate wood element energy, he easily sent all these things into the Ganoderma immortal's body. Through the crystallized body of the Ganoderma immortal, Wuqi saw that its core was still a pool of purple liquid, and a white pony was hovering quietly in it. 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation. Wuqi gave a strange laugh, then shook his head disdainfully and said, "The offensive strength of this formation is not enough, definitely not enough. The terrain here is not bad. There are mountains all around. Let me give you a little boost." After cleaning up all the traces in the surroundings, Wuqi plunged into the ground excitedly and began to work diligently. After digging a tunnel 100 miles underground, he guided a part of the energies from several dozens of nearby energy veins to the bottom of this slanting peak. Then, he constructed an extremely vicious formation, a formation that only allowed the energies to enter, and not allow them to leak out. All the energies were blocked in one spot, like a high-pressure boiler. Once it was detonated, the entire mountain ridges in the vicinity would be blown away. Fearing that the formation's offensive strength was not enough, Wuqi had also constructed countless vicious restrictive spells underground, all of which came from the Tao of ghosts and deities taught by Princess Xianglu. Once these restrictive spells were exposed, Wuqi was going to put the heavy blame on Yu Miao's head. "Old fool, I'm waiting to see a good show from you." Using Lu Yi and the others' plan, he would eradicate all the immortal sects within 1 million miles of Anhui City, then replace himself as the city lord of Anhui City. With the power of Anhui City, he would heal his wounds, and at the same time, gather all sorts of information about Panga continent, and put a load of shit on Yu Miao's head. Just when he was about to doze off, someone brought him a pillow. At the thought of this, Wuqi could not help but burst into laughter. Chapter 431. All the people under the heaven thought that they had the pearl of wisdom in the palm of their hands, but in fact, they were all people who were being calculated by others. Wuqi changed his visage and returned to Anhui City from outside the city. He did not return to the city lord mansion, but strolled aimlessly along the streets in Anhui City. With those celestial fiend puppets guarding the city lord mansion, it was no different from him being there. With 18 fiend immortals working together, Wuqi was not worried about anything in the vicinity of Anhui City. Outside the city gate, the 4 monks had already vanished without a trace. The arrogant ones were afraid of the reckless ones, the reckless ones were afraid of the reckless ones, and the reckless ones were afraid of the shameless ones. Following Wuqi's order, Madman Shui ransomed all the oldest and ugliest prostitutes in Anhui City, then threw them one after another into the vats used by the 4 monks to beg for alms. Although the monks had cultivated their state of mind to be as calm as a dried well, they still could not bear the laughter of several tens of thousands of cultivators in Anhui City. They threw away the vats, spun, and fled in a sorry state. When Wuqi returned to the city, over 100 old women were still standing at the city gate, cursing and scolding the monks. There was even an old lady who was so old that she was on her last breath, her body trembling as if she could die at any time. She was waving a big red handkerchief as she stomped her feet and roared, those bald donkeys. I've taken a fancy to their bald heads. That's the fortune they exchanged in their previous lives by smashing 100 wooden fishes and chanting scriptures. I've just hugged him and kissed him. Why did he run away? He deserves to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. On Pangu continent, no matter it was the territory governed by the human race or the territory governed by the immortal sects, there had never been such an unreasonable and unreliable thing. Just 100 or so old women were enough to scare the 4 great monks of Golden Pavilion Temple away. They were all eminent monks of the nascent divinity realm. The several tens of thousands of cultivators in Anhui city laughed so hard that their stomachs hurt. When Wu Qi entered the city, he could still hear these cultivators and mortals huddled together, discussing whether they could use the prostitutes to deal with those monks in the future. Wu Qi smacked his lips, listening to the discussions of the people around him complacently as he continued strolling along the main road. After walking for less than 15 minutes, Wu Qi suddenly saw a bookstore on the side of the road. There was even a sign hanging at the entrance of the shop. The words on it were very arrogant, selling illustrations of rare objects in the heavenly cycle. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat as he hurriedly walked into the shop. The scroll of stealing had recorded all the rare and precious items in the universe. But, as Pangu continent was expanding at any time, there might be new and novel items emerging from the chaotic airflow every day. As the scroll of stealing was something from a long time ago, it could not contain all the rare and precious items that could be found on Pangu continent now. Wu Qi felt that it was necessary for him to update the information in Scroll of Stealing, as there would always be something new. The interior of the huge shop was completely empty. The 4 walls were filled with bookshelves, and on top of them were jade slips that flickered with a faint glow. The storage of these jade slips was not large, and the labels at the bottom were all labeled with names such as Catalogue of Great Yu's Jing Province, Catalogue of Great Yu's Huang Province, Encyclopedia of Demons in West Ocean, and so on. In the innermost part of the shop, behind a small counter, an inconspicuous old man, clad in a green robe and a small burlap hat, was seen sitting on a wooden chair, silently reading a paper book while shaking his head. Next to the counter was a 9-storied bookshelf, placed on top of which were 63 jade slips. The volume of these jade slips was at least 100 times larger than those jade slips, and the labels underneath them were labeled with names such as Catalogue of 39 Easternmost Provinces of Diyu, and Guide to Spirit Herbs in 108 Perilous Lands around Diyu. Wu Qi walked around the bookstore, and finally came before the counter. He lightly knocked on the surface of the counter with his finger. The old man sitting behind the counter put down the book and slowly raised his head, squeezing out a simple smile on his wrinkled face. I have a customer. May I know what kind of things you need? My humble shop doesn't have everything you need, but I do have a few of all kinds of ancient books and illustrations. Wu Qi looked at the old man's smiling face, and didn't say anything for a long time. When the old man was reading with his head lowered, he didn't seem to notice anything wrong, but when he raised his head, a pair of pale and lusterless eyes were revealed. This was obviously a blind old man. When Wu Qi thought of the old man's intoxicated look while reading, he felt very strange in his heart. After a long while, Wu Qi let out a hollow laugh and asked, "May I ask, do you have a map book here?" The old man put down the book in his hand, and smilingly said, "Map book?" "Yes, the map book of Anhui County, as well as the maps of the surrounding provinces. However, you get what you pay for. The map book of Anhui County costs 1,000 gold ingots, or 100 low-grade energy stones. As for the maps of the surrounding provinces, each map costs 100,000 gold ingots, or 10,000 low-grade energy stones. For each additional province, the price will be increased by 50%. Blinking his eyes, Wu Qi carefully looked at the old man's pale eyes, and curiously asked, "How large is the area of this province?" The old man laughed, "Customer, you don't even know how large a province is, and you're here to buy a map book? It seems like you're interested in traveling." After a moment of silence, the old man nodded and said, "There's a Pegasus Palace in the Imperial Court of Diyu, which raises all kinds of Pegasus with the bloodline of divine beasts. Among them, the the fastest Pegasus can run 100 million miles in 1 day and 1 night. Showing 9 fingers, the old man flipped them back and forth, then smilingly said, a Pegasus can run for 81 days, and the area covered by it is the standard of a province of Deyu dynasty. Therefore, you can buy a map of a province with just 100 lower-grade energy stones. That's a very cheap price. Upon hearing the old man's words, Wuqi could not help but click his tongue. A province is actually such a huge piece of land? After a moment of silence, Wuqi lowered his voice and asked, then, do you have a map of the entire Panga continent? While Wuqi was pondering and did not say a word, the old man was trembling as he pulled out a coarse clay tea bowl from under the counter, then slowly took a sip of tea. Upon hearing Wuqi's question, the old man sprayed out a mouthful of tea and began to cough violently. It was as if a tea leaf was stuck in his throat. The old man's face turned red from the coughing, and his breath was stuck in his throat. Wuqi hurriedly went behind the counter, massaging the old man's chest with one hand and supporting the back of the old man's neck with the other. With a gentle shake, he shook the thick and long tea leaf out of the old man's throat. The old man coughed, and finally, his breathing became smoother. He panted a few times before he could breathe normally again. Rolling his eyes and giving Wuqi a glare, the old man murmured, please don't joke with me, my guest. You nearly choked me to death. The map of Panga continent? Hee, apart from the Panga's mountain and river map, in the imperial palace of Yu dynasty, and the cosmic mirror of rivers and mountains in the celestial court, which can show the whole face of Panga continent, who can know what Panga continent looks like now? Picking up the tea bowl and taking another sip, the old man shook his head and said, if you are a high-ranking immortal official of the celestial court, you can still get a part of the map of Panga continent from the celestial court. That is a territory that has been plundered by people for at least a few hundred times, and only a few leaves are left. The celestial court is still busy sending reliable immortals to plunder the maps of those new places. How could they possibly provide the maps to someone else? Stunned, Wuqi asked hurriedly, what about Deyu? The old man twitched his lips and said with a grin, what about Deyu? The prefectural governor of a county would have the maps of the nearby counties. The prefectural governor of a prefecture would have the maps of the nearby prefectures. Other than that, the generals who were stationed at various places would have the corresponding maps of their armies. As for the maps of the entire Panga continent, TSK, perhaps apart from the current human emperor, no one can have them. Wuqi fell silent. Frowning helplessly, he heaved a long sigh and said, well, old man, do you know a place called Yuxiong Plain? The old man's pale eyes darted back and forth, then he looked at Wuqi in surprise and said with a smile, don't you know that Yuxiong Plain is the capital city of Deyu? Wuqi clapped his hands and said, so, the capital city of Deyu is in Yuxiong Plain? Then, is it difficult to go to the capital city of Deyu? The old man shook his head bluntly and said, it's fine for the human race to go there. Any immortal cultivator who steps into it will be cut into pieces. The simple and straightforward answer made Wuqi feel suffocated in his heart. It's fine for the human race to go into Yuxiong Plain. Any immortal cultivator who steps into Yuxiong Plain will be cut into pieces? Wuqi asked with a little resentment, don't tell me those immortal officials of the celestial court will be cut into pieces as well? The old man nodded and said, not to mention those immortal officials, there was once a primordial immortal who strayed into Yuxiong Plain and was cut into pieces. Wuqi sucked in a cold breath and smacked his lips with difficulty. He laughed dryly and said, a primordial immortal. What kind of existence is that? The old man twitched his mouth and said with a smile, a primordial immortal is indeed powerful, but any immortal cultivator who dares to step into the 10 billion miles around the capital city of Deyu will end up the same. Unless he is an angel sent by the great celestial emperor of the celestial court, the middle celestial jade pivot, no other immortal cultivator will be able to step into Yuxiong Plain and die. Wuqi fell silent. Sighing, he took out a small pile of upper-grade energy stones and said, old man, please give me the maps of the few nearby provinces, as well as the maps of the 108 perilous lands around Deyu. And the maps of those rare and precious treasures as well. TSK, immortal cultivators are not allowed to enter the capital city of Diyu? That's boring. While laughing, the blind old man took out a few jade scrolls and jade slips and handed them to Wu Qi, then quickly pocketed the upper-grade energy stones Wu Qi had placed on the counter. He smiled at Wu Qi and said, "It's a good idea to travel around Panga continent, my dear guest. Young man, it's always good to travel and see more. But, for immortal cultivators, it's better not to get too close to the capital city of Yu dynasty, provincial cities, county cities, and military garrisons, or you will be killed." Smacking his lips, Wu Qi shook his head, then took out a packet of spirit tea he collected on Myriad Immortals planet and gave it to the blind old man. "Well, I'll think of something from the celestial court." "Tisk, it's just a map." Grumbling under his breath, Wu Qi turned to the old man and said with a smile, "Thank you, old man. This tea is nice. Try this." The blind old man was taken aback. Then, he smiled and took over the packet, then fished out another tea from the counter and gave it to Wu Qi. "You are very kind, my dear guest. After so many years, this is the first time that a customer has given me tea. The tea smells nice. But, my dear guest, you can try my tea as well. It has an extraordinary taste." Wu Qi took over the tea indifferently. After chatting with the blind old man for a while, he shook his head and walked out of the bookstore. After taking a few steps on the street, Wu Qi suddenly felt that something was not right. He jerked his head and looked over his shoulder. Where was the bookstore? Originally, the bookstore's neighbors were a restaurant and a butcher shop. But now, the bookstore was gone, and the restaurant and the butcher's shop were right next to each other, and their business was booming. A chill rushed up from the bottom of his heart. Looking at the tiny packet of tea in his hand, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Did I just see a ghost?" It was broad daylight, and with Wu Qi's current cultivation base, how could a ghost dare to appear before him? Chapter 432. Without hesitation, Wu Qi took a few steps forward and exercised the mystic eyes of universe in front of the restaurant and the butcher shop. He gave it a careful look, but found no trace. The bookstore had disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed in the first place. With one swift motion, Wu Qi grabbed a cultivator who was passing by. The nascent soul cultivator glared at him and was about to scold him, but Wu Qi tightened his fingers. Immediately, the cultivator's nascent soul was imprisoned by a tremendous force. The nascent soul cultivator, who was glaring at Wu Qi a moment ago, quickly bowed and asked in a low voice, "Senior, what can I do for you?" "Junior will definitely help Senior handle it properly." With a cold snort, Wu Qi pointed at the wall between the restaurant and the butcher's shop and asked, "Was there a bookstore here?" The nascent soul cultivator was struck dumb for a long while. He glanced to the left and right, then with a look of astonishment on his face, he said to Wu Qi, "Senior, I've been staying in Anhe City for over 100 years. The food and wine and drunken immortal in here are very delicious, and Old Yellow Butcher Shop is an old shop with tens of generations of history. Their pork and mutton are all of the best quality. As for the bookstore, in the entire Anhe City, there is only one right outside the City Lord Mansion, and it specializes in selling some miscellaneous items." Swallowing a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty, Wu Qi pushed the nascent soul cultivator far away, then took a step forward and vanished with a teleportation. The nascent soul cultivator was thrown away by Wu Qi abruptly, causing him to stagger and fall to the ground. Thinking that he was protected by his master, he was about to scold Wu Qi, but when he saw Wu Qi suddenly vanish, he quickly covered his mouth and gave himself a few slaps on the face. Good heavens, where is that nascent divinity cultivator? No, I think he is a heaven immortal senior. Even teleportation is so easy. Lao Tzu was thrown to the ground by a heaven immortal today. What an honor! Happily, the cultivator rose to his feet, threw his head back and laughed complacently. Being tripped by a heaven immortal is a great fortune. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi teleported back to the City Lord mansion, and immediately exchanged his identity with the celestial fiend puppet who had disguised as him. Hastily, he found Lao Ai, who was deceiving Hidden Heart in the back hall of the City Lord mansion. Lowering his voice, he warned, "You have to be extra careful in the next few days. Someone extraordinary has shown up in the city, and I just bumped into him." Lao Ai retracted the Buddhist light indifferently and asked indifferently, "What extraordinary figure?" Wu Qi hurriedly told Lao Ai what had happened to him. Lao Ai's expression suddenly changed. He stared blankly at Wu Qi and said, "He just disappeared into thin air for no reason." His bookstore is between the restaurant and the butcher's shop. Why didn't anyone else notice anything unusual? Wu Qi nodded vigorously and said in a deep voice, "That bookstore is definitely not targeted at me. It's just a temporary bookstore opened by the blind old man. But none of his neighbors are surprised by this. What an amazing method." Lao Ai shuddered. He sniffed and gave a cautious glance to the left and right as he said, "That Lu Yi is just a small potato. He's just here to stir up some trouble. I don't think He City will stir up any storm, will I? With our current cultivation base, we can't afford to suffer such a little trouble. Why don't we leave now?" Glaring fiercely at Lao Ai, Wu Qi said with a cold grin, "Leave? Why should we leave? Fortune comes from danger. We just have to be careful. I'm determined to occupy He City. Even if we have to leave, we'll do it when we can't hold on any longer." Wu Qi fished out a tea bag, about the size of a baby's fist, given to him by the blind old man, and said in a low voice, "Come, let's see what's the secret of this tea." After signaling Hidden Heart to close the door, Wu Qi took out a small charcoal stove and a teapot, which were specially used to boil tea. With a casual point of his finger, a stream of clear water emerged from the air and poured into the teapot. Then, he fished out a few pieces of high-quality silver frost charcoal and lit a fire. Before long, the water in the teapot was boiled. When he opened the tea bag, Wu Qi found that it was a bag of coarse tea leaves. The leaves were huge, and the stalks were not even properly separated. The aroma of the tea leaves was strong and bitter, and one could easily tell that it was not a good tea. Wu Qi did not care about that. He threw about 50 grams of tea into the teapot, then turned on the fire and began to boil it. After boiling the tea, Wu Qi threw the charcoal stove back into the black dragon spirit ring, then took out 4 large bowls and divided the dark tea into 4 equal portions. Not only the tea, Wu Qi also divided the tea leaves and threw them into the bowls. He picked up a bowl of tea, stared at Lao Ai, smiled and said, "If you have the guts, drink this tea with me and see what kind of effect it has." Hee, I've made a deal with him, and I've even given him a bag of fine tea leaves. I don't think he would use poison to harm people, would he? Madman Shui and Hidden Heart turned to look at Lao Ai at the same time, but Lao Ai was sitting motionlessly on the bed. He crooked his lips and stared at Wu Qi as he said, "You drink first. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. I, Lao Ai, can be considered half a gentleman." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a scornful glance, his eyes filled with disdain. Lao Ai's expression did not change. He was still sitting on the bed with a solemn expression, clasping his palms together as he stared at Wu Qi. Seeing how shameless Lao Ai was, Wu Qi was at his wit's end. He picked up a large bowl and took a deep breath, then carefully poured the tea into his mouth along with the tea leaves. It was bitter, and very astringent. On top of that, it was as if the tea was filled with soil, so coarse that it was hard to swallow. However, when Wu Qi tried his best to swallow the tea and all the tea leaves into his stomach, a warm stream of energy rose from his stomach and slowly circulated through his entire body. The aura of death that had accumulated in Wu Qi's body slowly melted away, transforming into pure energy, which was the complete opposite of the aura of death, and fused into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi was drenched in sweat, while a pure yang energy spread out from his body, causing the temperature in the room to rise significantly. Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi felt that he was like a little seedling that was suddenly nourished by sunlight, water, and abundant fertilizer, growing bigger and bigger in an instant, turning into a strong and sturdy tree. His 5 internal organs were moving at the same time, and the innate spirit root in them was growing stronger at the same time. The vigorous life force made Wu Qi feel very comfortable. After drinking a bowl of tea, Wu Qi felt every aspect of his body was strengthened. Even his cultivation of 36 transformations of heavenly dragons showed signs of breaking through the 36th transformation realm at any time and entering the 35th transformation realm. He gave a loud and joyful laugh, then reached out his hand to grab the other 3 bowls in front of him. However, even though Wu Qi was fast, Lao Ai, Madman Shui, and Hidden Heart were even faster. Right when the pure yang energy spread out from Wu Qi's body, they had already reached out their hands and grabbed one of the bowls. While Wu Qi was laughing joyfully, they had already shoved all the tea and tea leaves into their mouths, swallowing them in one gulp. All of a sudden, Hidden Heart sighed lightly. A relic emerged above his head, with 3 white lotus thrones underneath it. Madman Shui laughed joyfully as a pinkish beam shot out from the top of his head, amidst which, a tiny nascent soul was seen wheeling. Meanwhile, Lao Ai snorted coldly. Crisp cracking noises could be heard coming from all over his body, while a large amount of extravasated blood kept oozing out from under his skin. A delightful, evil smile emerged from the corner of Lao Ai's mouth. Streams of pink light kept bursting out of his body, and gradually, a faint golden hue could be seen in them. Eventually, the light emanating from his body turned into a pure golden color. The wheel of delight shot out from the back of Lao Ai's head. 3 fist-sized relics could be seen hovering on top of the wheel, each glinting with a pinkish light. Underneath each relic were 3 golden lotus flowers, which made a total of 9 golden lotuses hovering behind Lao Ai's head. An intoxicating fragrance kept spreading out from Lao Ai's body, and amidst the fragrance was a bizarre force that could make one's nascent divinity sway. Looking at the strange phenomenon above Lao Ai's head, Hidden Heart could not help but nod and praise, truly worthy of being the true form of Bodhisattva. Such a marvelous divine ability is not something common monks like us can compare with. Instinctively, Wu Qi held his breath and sealed all the pores on his body. He even cast a few restrictive spells around him, isolating the fragrance wafting out from Lao Ai's body. Then, he sent a divine will towards Lao Ai and asked, "What trick are you playing?" Lao Ai's divine will quickly replied, "It is indeed an excellent tea, a supreme treasure. My injuries have fully healed, and I've already formed the lotus thrones and immortal soul. Now, I've attained the realm of heaven immortal and arhat at the same time. Hee. Once I unleash my aura, I will be able to attract the heavenly tribulation." While Wu Qi was about to mock Lao Ai, the celestial fiend puppet, who was pretending to be courteous with Lu Yi in the city lord mansion, suddenly sent him a clear divine will. "Retract all the strange signs. Quick!" Wu Qi cried out in a low voice, "The people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace are here, and their leader is Lady Qiao, together with her 2 gigolos. TSK. Both of her gigolos are 33rd tier heaven immortals." Right after Wu Qi's voice faded, a soft, coquettish and flirtatious voice was heard coming from the front, "I'm here. Why aren't you greeting me quickly, my children?" Rip. Upon hearing the voice, Madman Shui's trousers were ripped open. Wow! Hidden Heart, whose cultivation base was only at the peak of Jin Dan realm, could not resist the voice at all. As the cultivation technique of Euphoria Heavenly Palace and the Zen technique of Buddhist League happened to be the nemesis of each other, the devilish voice invaded his mind, causing blood to spray out from all 7 apertures of his. Wu Qi's body swayed slightly, but his face immediately returned to normal. Looking at the pale-faced old monk, he casually cast a spirit talisman on his body and helped him stabilize his mind. Among all the people, only Lao Ai was not affected by the voice. Instead, he became extremely excited, hastily pulling out a new set of clothes and dressing himself. Judging from the voice, this woman is even more exciting than that coquettish vixen Su Meier. I'm going to have a good time with her today. Before long, Wu Qi, who had retracted all his aura, followed behind Lao Ai, whose body seemed to be glowing with a bright light. They came to the front gate of the courtyard to greet Lady Qiao, the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. As soon as Lao Ai appeared, the faintly discernible fragrance on his body drifted away, filling the entire courtyard with his faint aroma. Suddenly, the flirtatious voice rang out, filled with an unconcealable joy. I didn't expect to meet such an amazing man like young master here. I wonder if Qiao is fated to invite young master into my tent. Chapter 433. The Euphoria Heavenly Palace was very imposing. Right in the center of the hall was a cloud bed, measuring 13 feet in both width and length. It was covered with white muslin and lined with silver fox fur, and was carried by 32 beautiful women. Countless fresh petals were hovering around the cloud bed. Faintly, a fragrant mist could be seen lingering in the air. Every now and then, the light muslin would flutter in the wind, revealing a beautiful figure that was faintly visible in the middle of the cloud bed. Before the cloud bed were 36 pairs of young boys and girls, who were carrying flower baskets and incense burners and sprinkling flower petals along the way. Purple smoke kept rising from the incense burners. Behind the cloud bed were 72 young men, who were extraordinarily handsome. They were clad in white, tight-fitting clothes, and had bulging muscles on their bodies. Behind them were a group of cultivators of all shapes and sizes. Some were male, some were female, some were old, and some were young. However, their eyes and brows were filled with a lustful aura. Among these cultivators, 2 middle-aged men stood out. One of them was clad in a green robe and a green hat, holding a green jade fan in his hand. All 10 of his fingers were decorated with jadeite rings, a jade belt around his waist, and a pair of jade boots on his feet. His entire body was shrouded in a jade gleam, and he looked like a huge cucumber. The other man was clad in a golden robe and a golden hat. His entire body was golden in color, and around his neck were tens of thick and large golden chains that looked like dog leashes. The golden gleam emanating from his body was so bright that it hurt one's eyes. This pair of supreme-grade figures stood among the cultivators. When they looked at someone, they did not use their eyes, but their nostrils. When they did not look at anyone, their nostrils would be pointed at the sky. They were so arrogant, so condescending, and so conceited. Perhaps even the emperor of the celestial court and the human emperor of Yu dynasty could not compare with them. These 2 should be the 2 gigolos brought here by Lady Qiao, the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. 2 of them were itinerant cultivators with a cultivation base of 33rd tier Heaven Immortal. One of them was Lord Jade, and the other was Mr. Gold. Among Lady Qiao's gigolos, these 2 men were the wealthiest, and their cultivation bases were the strongest. Therefore, whenever Lady Qiao went out, these 2 men who were willing to spend a lot of money were always by her side, and they were always willing to spend money for no reason. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and looked at Lord Jade and Mr. Gold. For a moment, he was tempted. According to Reverend San Li's memory, both of them were friends with some prefecture overseers of Yu dynasty, and had been secretly mining some precious mineral veins that were forbidden by Yu dynasty. As a result, not only did they possess an extraordinary cultivation base, even the immortal items they possessed were of the best quality, be it in terms of quantity or quality. The delicate fragrance emanating from Lao Ai attracted the attention of Lady Qiao, who was sitting on the cloud bed. She opened her mouth and invited Lao Ai to be her guest. Instantly, the faces of Lord Jade and Mr. Gold changed. Lord Jade said in a cold voice, "Qiao, this brat is born strong and strong. Don't let him look like a silver spear tip and be tormented until his body becomes weak in just a few moves." On the other hand, Mr. Jean said in an even more blatant manner, "Qiao, luckily, our cultivation base is much higher than yours, so we can barely endure your tricks. Every year, we waste a lot of magic power and cultivation base in your stomach. I don't think this brat can withstand your plucking, can he?" Wu Qi bowed his head and did not say a word. Just now, the celestial fiend puppet who had transformed into Reverend Sanle had sent the news about the Ganoderma horse to Euphoria Heavenly Palace through a secret channel. Lady Qiao was delighted, and she could not wait to rush over here, as she was planning to investigate the slanting peak. Meanwhile, in the City Lord mansion, some servants who were loyal to the former City Lord, Master Jing'an, had also spread the news through some channels. As the 4 guardians of Golden Pavilion Temple were not far away from here, presumably, Golden Pavilion Temple had received the news as well. According to Lu Yi's plan, when Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple started fighting over the Ganoderma horse, the other immortal sects in Anhe City would receive the related information as well. At that point of time, there would be a good show to watch. While pondering over all these, Lao Ai had already burst out laughing and said, "Look like a silver spear tip. Who dares to say they have an indestructible body in front of me? Hee, Lao. Lao Qianye has an extraordinary innate talent, and that is not something you can understand." The white gauze on the cloud bed fluttered, and a purple smoke drifted over, rolling up Lao Ai and sending him into the cloud bed. Lady Qiao's seductive laughter was heard coming from the cloud bed. "Good man, let me give you a good test on your martial arts. If you exaggerate, don't blame me for being merciless." Although the white gauze had covered Lao Ai's body, his evil voice could still be heard clearly. "Rest assured, Palace Master. I'm just worried that Palace Master might not be able to withstand my plundering, and might damage Palace Master's energy essence with just a few moves. That would be a serious offense." Lady Qiao let out a wild and unbridled laugh, which was as sharp as a blade, piercing into one's ears and giving one a sharp pain. She laughed aloud and said, "Io, Sanle, you have taken in some pretty good subordinates. Hee, Lao Qianye. What an interesting name you have. Which man dares to say he can work hard for 1,000 nights in front of me?" Faint noises of clouds and raindrops could be heard coming from the cloud bed, as large sheets of clouds drifted out from under it. A few ladies standing next to the cloud bed gave a soft cry, and the group of cultivators surrounded Chi-Chi on the cloud bed and flew southward. After flying for over 1,000 miles southward, they had completely left Anhe City's cultivators' line of sight. Using their divine will, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold carefully scanned the surroundings a few times, and only then did they change their direction, heading straight towards the slanting peak which Wu Qi had prepared just now. Along the way, Lao Ai and Lady Qiao could be heard shouting, laughing, and moaning, as well as all sorts of strange noises coming out from the cloud bed. However, the cloud bed was actually a superb magical item that was hard to come by. The white gauze was fluttering on the outside, bringing up a large amount of white smoke that lingered in the air. No one could see what was happening inside with their naked eyes, and no divine will could penetrate through it. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi could clearly see the intense battle going on inside. However, he was not interested in this shady business. No. Wu Qi was not interested, but the part of his soul that belonged to Lu Xiaobai was very interested in this scene. Quietly, he exercised the mystic eyes of universe. Feeling helpless, Wu Qi turned his head around stiffly. With a pair of eyes that emitted a faint gleam, he saw through the white gauze and saw the intense battle going on inside. It was as if 7 to 8 mad bulls were slamming into each other. Lao Ai and Lady Qiao, who had a graceful appearance and a dignified expression that made her look like a saintess, were coiled around each other like 2 great pythons. Using all their strength, they were devouring each other's energy, magic power, cultivation base, blood essence, and energy essence. They were crazily devouring and extracting everything that could be extracted from each other. Both of them had their skin suffused with a bizarre pinkish hue, especially Lady Qiao's skin, which had a tinge of an unusual blood color. Her eyes were showing the whites of her eyes, her body was trembling and twitching, while saliva kept dripping down from the corners of her mouth. Obviously, Lao Ai's Great Sun Divine technique was much stronger than the cultivation technique she specialized in. In this head-on battle, Lady Qiao had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Not only was her body in a disadvantageous position, even her mind had been controlled by Lao Ai. Her soft moans, loud laughter, every single word she said, every single word she said, were all under Lao Ai's control. Standing next to the bed, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had their faces twisted and unsightly. From time to time, they would throw angry glances at the bed, but they could never imagine that their beloved girl was on the verge of losing her cultivation base. In just a short period of time, all her cultivation base would be completely absorbed by Lao Ai. As Lao Ai had just stepped into the ranks of heaven immortals, if he could obtain all of Lady Qiao's energy, perhaps it would be possible for him to break through another tier. Shaking his head, Wu Qi forcibly dispelled the tiny bit of curiosity and beautiful thought in his mind. Silently, he recalled the face of Princess Xianglu, forcing his restless heart to calm down. He was laughing in his mind, wondering how many people Lady Qiao had harmed with such amorous tactics. Finally, she had met her nemesis, Lao Ai. In Reverend San Li's memory, all the male disciples of Euphoria Heavenly Palace were once Lady Qiao's opponents on the bed, and each of them had their yang energy drained by her. Take Reverend San Lu as an example. If not for Lady Qiao seizing a great amount of his yang energy, he would not have remained an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. A wicked man will always be tortured by another wicked man. TSK, as long as I can control Lao Ai and prevent him from harming good people, I will be rewarded with immeasurable virtues. At the thought of this, Wu Qi nearly put his palms together and bowed to Reverend San Lu, uttering the name of Buddha or something. The company drifted into the eastern lofty mountain. The sun had set, and a bright moon was rising from the distant horizon. Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the bright moon. He was curious, wondering how big the moon must be, since Pangu continent was such a huge landmass, for the people on the ground to have such a clear view of it. And, the moon essence contained in this bright moon was simply appalling. Right when the moonlight sprinkled down, their bodies were immediately covered with a layer of sparkling silver gleam. Wu Qi could not help but gasp. Pangu continent was indeed a blessed land for cultivators. No wonder all the immortal sects were willing to invade Yu dynasty's territory, regardless of the danger. The moon essence here was pure and rich. Not only was it dozens of times stronger than the moon essence Wu Qi gathered with the formation back on Green Cliff Planet, it was also pure and without any impurities. As long as one absorbed the moon essence into one's body, one would not need to circulate the energy, as it could be directly transformed into the prime energy of a cultivator. After entering the mountainous area, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold took the initiative to guard the front and back of the company. Lord Jade took the lead and cleared the way, while Mr. Gold brought up the rear about 100 miles away. Along the way, as long as they found a place where someone might be hiding, or a place with a slightly abnormal aura, they would be swept away by the sword beams unleashed by both men. Even a few mountain rats who had just gained sentience were shredded into pieces by the sword beams. After advancing cautiously for over 2 hours, the company finally arrived at the slanting peak that Wu Qi had just visited during the day. Lord Jade and Mr. Gold rushed up together, pulling away the wisteria at the root of the slanting peak, revealing the huge crystallized Ganoderma. Wow! Many cultivators from Euphoria Heavenly Palace were knowledgeable, and when they saw the huge Ganoderma, they immediately cried out in surprise. Without saying a word, both Lord Jade and Mr. Gold unleashed their sword beams and hacked at the Ganoderma. Clang! 2 loud clangs rang out as the sword beams were pushed back, nearly cutting both men's bodies in half. Lord Jade turned his head and cried out hastily, "Qiao, this is the remains of a Ganoderma immortal. How can we open it?" Lady Qiao did not say a word. She and Lao Ai were at a critical juncture. Lao Ai was pressing against Lady Qiao's entrance, and Lady Qiao's cultivation base was stuck at the entrance. As long as Lao Ai exerted a little more strength, all the immortal energies that Lady Qiao had painstakingly accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years would become Lao Ai's. Right at this critical juncture, a strong gust of wind suddenly came rushing down from above. Without raising his head, Wu Qi spun and began to walk away. While running, he cried out, "Not good. Enemy attack." Even in the midst of all this, Wu Qi did not forget Lu Yi. He grabbed Lu Yi by the neck and dragged him out of the place. Above them, a bronze statue of Vajra, standing 1,000 feet tall and emanating an ancient and dignified aura, was smashing down from above. The statue of Vajra had a fierce look on its face, and it was holding a Vajra scepter in its hand. It had a very lifelike face, as if it was a real Vajra who had descended to the mortal world. Hovering above the statue of Vajra were 18 old monks clad in bright red kasayas, forming a circle and performing the Vajra devil-subduing incantation with their hands. How dare you, an evil cultivator, covet a rare natural treasure? This treasure is fated with Buddhism. Retreat now, evil cultivator. Chapter 434. A strange howl rang out as the huge bronze statue brushed past Wuqi's body and smashed down. Wuqi narrowly avoided the attack of the statue. However, he intentionally shook his wrist, causing Lu Yi's body to tilt to one side. The edge of the statue, which was actually a corner of the fluttering cloth on its back, gently swept across Lu Yi's body, from his right knee all the way to his ankle. It scraped his right calf and crushed all his bones and muscles. Lu Yi howled and hissed in pain, tears and mucus spraying out from his eyes. Wuqi grabbed him by the neck and sprinted away, while transforming into a gust of wind and shouting, "Fear not, brother Lu Yi. With me here, I'll definitely protect you." While Wuqi was shouting, an old monk clad in a red robe sitting cross-legged on top of the statue suddenly saw Wuqi, who had transformed into a gust of chilly wind and was running away. Casually, the old monk threw out a Buddhist bead and cried out sternly, "Kill all the evils. Evildoer, face your death." Upon leaving his hand, the black sandalwood bead transformed into a ball of thunderbolt the size of a basin, whistling through the air and thrusting towards Wuqi's back. The strong wind stirred up by the bead even threw a few gold core cultivators of Euphoria Heavenly Palace flying away. He turned his head and saw the Buddhist bead coming at him from the corner of his eyes. With a wave of his hand, a defensive magical treasure named Green Cicada Wings, which was one of the spirit items given to him by many seniors of Yuanhua sect before he left, flew out of his hand, transforming into a sheet of green mist that enveloped Wuqi's back. Right when the green cicada wings were unleashed, a shrill, heart-wrenching cry of cicadas rang out. Several hundred blurry, fist-sized green cicadas flew out, wheeling rapidly inside and outside the green mist. Their thin membranous wings were flapping rapidly, while rings of white wind blades that could be seen with naked eyes flew out and greeted the thunderbolt transformed from the Buddhist bead. With a loud bang, the lightning exploded, and the longan-sized Buddhist beads were shattered by the green cicada wings. The scattered thunderbolts transformed into several dozens of flame beams and shot out in all directions. Wuqi flicked his wrist again, and one of the flame beams fell onto Lu Yi's buttocks. In just a blink of an eye, his pants were burned to a crisp, and a thumb-sized purple thunderbolt flame stuck on Lu Yi's buttocks, producing a sizzling noise as it burned. Very soon, a fist-sized pit was formed. Lu Yi had nearly fainted from the pain from the wound on his calf, and now, Wuqi had played another trick on him. Lu Yi's eyes went wide and he let out a heart-wrenching howl. His scream was so loud that it even drowned out green cicada wings chirping. Lu Yi, who was originally handsome and elegant, suddenly changed his expression. His fair and handsome little face suddenly became as yellow as dried cured meat. His whole body was covered in cold sweat, like a small stream was spurting out. Grabbing Lu Yi's neck, Wuqi dragged him and fled quickly. While fleeing, he kept shouting, "Don't worry, brother Lu Yi. With me here, you won't die. You definitely won't die." A loud boom was heard coming from several miles behind them. Riding on the frighteningly huge bronze statue of Vajra, the 18 old monks smashed viciously onto Lady Qiao's cloud bed. Thousands of layers of white mist burst out from the cloud bed, trying to block the impact of the statue of Vajra. However, among the 18 old monks, at least 3 of them possessed the cultivation base of heaven immortals. Using the divine ability of Vajra subduing devils from the Zen school, they had formed a formation and activated the Vajra magical item that had been worshipped before the Buddha for countless years, transforming it into a gigantic statue of Vajra. The tremendous pressure brought by the statue of Vajra was comparable to the impact brought by 100 Mount Titians falling from a height of several tens of thousands of miles. Layers upon layers of clouds were shattered, and streams of auspicious light were seen drifting and dispersing. Amidst Lady Qiao's hoarse and despairing howl, the statue of Vajra smashed the cloud bed, smashing it straight onto the ground along with several hundred young boys and girls, handsome young men, and cultivators of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. The surrounding mountains trembled violently, as the statue of Vajra had sunk nearly 1 mile deep into the ground. Fearing that the person who was crushed under the statue would not die, the 18 old monks hovered several hundred feet above the ground, quickly performing incantation gestures with both hands while reciting the scripture of subduing devils. After that, they unleashed a beam of Buddhist light at the statue of Vajra. The statue of Vajra leaped abruptly, then unleashed countless thunderbolts that shot straight up into the sky. After that, a 7-colored Buddhist light came wheeling over from all directions, quickly transforming into a 7-colored beam that plunged straight down. Within the beam of light, a few ancient Buddha statues could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged. Their hands were performing the swastika incantation, and behind them, there were countless vague shadows of bodhisattvas, arhats, vajras, heavenly kings, and many others. The 7-colored beam of light fused into the Vajra statues of Vajra Buddhas. The ground shook violently, and several dozens of mountains in the vicinity crumbled at the same time. Mountains toppled, rivers changed their course, and in many places, the ground was torn open with bottomless crevices. Water from the rivers flowed into these crevices and disappeared without a trace. An extremely sorrowful and indignant voice rang out, "Qiao'er, Qiao'er." It was not easy for me, Lao Qianye, to find the one I love, but you are actually killed by these bald donkeys. About 100 feet away from the crater created by the statue of Vajra, the ground suddenly exploded. Lao Ai carried Lady Qiao up into the sky, her body drenched in blood, her bones and tendons shattered, her head smashed like a rotten watermelon, and a golden glow rippling out from between her brows. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell with just one glance that there was a golden glow flowing out from between Lady Qiao's brows. It was a unique sign that her immortal soul was shattered, and the source energy of her soul was returning to the heaven and earth. 18 red-robed old monks laughed joyfully together and said, "Excellent, excellent. The culprit has been eliminated, and now, the world is once again clear and bright." The old monk who attacked Wu Qi just now cried out sternly, "What are you waiting for, evildoers? Could it be that you want to have your soul destroyed like this evil woman?" Covered in blood, Lao Ai gave those old monks a venomous look, then abruptly took a step forward and teleported several tens of miles away. "Just you wait, you bald donkeys. I won't let you go. I don't have the strength to avenge Qiao today, but once I become a primordial immortal, I'll definitely slaughter my way to Golden Pavilion Temple and slaughter all the bald donkeys in your temple." Tisk, the 18 red-robed old monks felt a sense of disgust in their hearts. It was not too late for a gentleman to seek revenge even after 10 years. Wait until you become a primordial immortal before you go to Golden Pavilion Temple and seek revenge. Ugh, how many primordial immortals are there in the Celestial Court? I reckon the number of top-notch primordial immortals can be counted with 2 hands, right? Wait until you become a primordial immortal before you come and seek revenge. Do you really want to avenge Lady Qiao, or do you not want to keep her alive? Suddenly, the ground cracked open again, from within which, 18 celestial fiend puppets, who had transformed into Reverend San Lu and his companions, sprung out of the ground, carrying the filthy madman Shui. While fleeing at top speed like a gust of wind, Reverend San Lu cried out sternly, "I'll leave the remains of the Ganoderma immortal to you bald donkeys. Uncle Masters, senior and junior brothers, run now. These bald donkeys are coming at us menacingly, and they are not easy to deal with." The celestial fiend puppet, who had transformed into Min Hua, cried out hoarsely, "Where there's life, there's hope. My fellow disciples, we need to flee now. Once we've accumulated our overall strength and become primordial immortals, we'll come back and settle the score with these bald donkeys." Led by Lao Ai, the group of celestial fiend puppets brought Lady Qiao's corpse and the unharmed madman Shui, fleeing at top speed in the direction Wu Qi fled. Their speed was so fast that the group of old red-robed monks, who had just unleashed a very powerful restrictive spell, did not have the time to chase after them. Therefore, they no longer had the time to chase after Lao Ai and his companions. All 18 celestial fiend puppets roared at the top of their voices, "The remains of a Ganoderma immortal have been found here. Fellow Taoists, don't let these cruel and merciless old bald donkeys have it. Seize it, seize it." Once a mortal consumes a Ganoderma horse formed from the blood essence left behind by a Ganoderma immortal, even a heaven immortal will have a great improvement in his cultivation base. He has a chance of becoming a gold immortal, a gold immortal. These celestial fiend puppets did not have fleshly bodies, but were fiend immortals who had half fleshly bodies and half puppet bodies. When they roared at the same time, the sound waves spread to a distance of several thousand miles. All the mortals in Anhui city had heard the commotion, and knew that the remains of a Ganoderma immortal had been found in this mountain. The people of Euphoria Heavenly Palace were following closely beside Lady Qiao's bed. Lady Qiao was controlled by Lao Ai's evil technique, smashed to a pulp by the Vajra statue, and had all her energy essence sucked dry by Lao Ai. How could the rest of them withstand the joint attack unleashed by 3 heaven immortals and 18 nascent divinity cultivators? Apart from the celestial fiend puppets, Lao Ai, and madman Shui, all the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace were smashed to pieces. Only Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had a profound cultivation base, and they were quick to react. When the Vajra statue came smashing down, they did not dare to face the divine ability of subduing evil unleashed by the 18 old monks with the help of Buddhist items. Hastily, they teleported to one side. When Lao Ai fled with Lady Qiao's broken body, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold rushed back as if their parents had just passed away, crying and wailing, "Qiao, Qiao, how tragic your death is. We must avenge you. We must avenge you." Amidst the shrill cries, Lord Jade casually threw 3 strangely shaped jade axes into the air, which transformed into 3 huge bright moons and thrust down towards the old monks. On the other side, Mr. Gold roared furiously and waved both arms. Immediately, countless golden blades, golden spears, golden swords, and golden axes blotted the sky, smashing down towards the old monks like a raging storm. Together, both of them exercised the divine ability of immortals, casually pointing a finger at the surrounding mountains. Immediately, several dozens of lofty mountains flew whistling up into the sky, compressed into small clumps of soil about the size of a fist in just a blink of an eye, then smashed down towards the 3 heaven immortal old monks amidst a very strong earth energy. Chi-Chi roared. Suddenly, an old monk of heaven immortal realm broke free from the formation and sped towards the clump of Ganoderma at the foot of the slanting peak, completely ignoring the attacks from Lord Jade and Mr. Gold. Meanwhile, the other old monks gave a loud cry. All 17 of them stood in the positions of the 8 trigrams and 9 palaces, while relics flew out from the top of their heads at the same time, transforming into a large sheet of Buddhist light that shielded the mountain ridges several miles in circumference. The Vajra statue, which was smashed into the ground just now, flew up slowly and sat cross-legged under the feet of the 18 old monks. Both of its hands locked into the mudra of indestructible Vidyaraja, unleashing a bronze light barrier that was as thick as a city wall. The attacks from Lord Jade and Mr. Gold smashed onto the Buddhist light barrier unleashed by the old monks, but they could only produce countless ripples, cracking and rolling the ground in all directions. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not break through the defense of the old monks. The defensive divine ability of the Buddhist League was famous throughout the universe. When these Buddhist cultivators really put aside their pride and focused on defending with all their might, not many people could break through their Buddhist restrictive spells. The old monk who broke free was holding a shining golden blade in his hand. Without uttering a single word, he leaped onto the Ganoderma, swung the blade and hacked it down. A loud clanging noise rang out and sparks flew in all directions. The blade went at least 1 finger deep into the Ganoderma. Suddenly, several hundred loud shouts were heard coming from near and far. "You bald donkey, do you really think you can covet a natural treasure of this level?" Lights and shadows flickered in the surroundings, as at least 5 heaven immortals, 30 nascent divinity cultivators, and several hundred nascent soul cultivators and Jean Dan cultivators rushed over from all directions. Chapter 435. In a small valley dozens of miles away, Wu Qi threw Lu Yi to the ground, panting heavily, and threw a bottle of medicinal powder he concocted to Lu Yi. "Apply it yourself if you don't want to die. TSK, brother Lu Yi, you must remember my favor. If it weren't for me, would you have escaped alive?" Lu Yi grabbed the bottle with one hand. With a sallow face, he stared blankly at the mountain area where the battle was in a mess and dust was rising into the sky. "How did this happen?" he asked in a daze. "This is not what I planned. My 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation is not ready yet, so how did they know about it? Ah! How did this happen? Why did they come so quickly?" Wu Qi gave Lu Yi a sideways glance and did not give him an explanation. "It was impossible for them to go according to your plan. Therefore, I had to inform the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace in advance, so that they could know what was happening here. Putting aside the power of your 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation, how many heaven immortals can it deal with?" Since Wu Qi had already set up an ambush 100 miles underground, there was no need for your 4 gates immortal slaughtering formation. "Wouldn't it be better to let the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace come here in advance and trigger the event?" The best part was that when the event was triggered in advance, the people behind Lu Yi would not be able to react in time, and could only act hastily. In this way, Wu Qi would have the upper hand. If everything went according to Lu Yi's plan, they would have the upper hand, and Wu Qi would be forced into a passive position, wouldn't he? Looking at the scene where the battle was in full swing, Wu Qi clicked his tongue and exclaimed, "This Lord Jade and Mr. Gold are really wealthy. Both of them are 33rd tier heaven immortals, and they have more than a dozen immortal items with them. Oh my, if they dared to go to outer heavenly realms, they would have been robbed long ago." Looking at the shadows of various weapons that kept soaring into the sky, Wu Qi knew that they were the unique signs of immortal items being activated. Seeing that, Wu Qi's appetite was greatly stimulated. A strange gust of wind came blowing, as Lao Ai came running over with the corpse of Lady Qiao in his arms. Her body was covered in blood, and her immortal soul had completely collapsed. Casually, he threw Lady Qiao's body onto Lu Yi's body and shouted, "Pretty boy, dig a hole for me and give her a proper burial." After all, it was just a romantic moment. I am not such a heartless person. Dig a deep pit and build a good coffin. If you don't do a good job, I'll kill you. Lu Yi's face turned blue with rage. I'm Reverend San Li's advisor, my advisor. What are you doing? What are you doing? A strong wind blew, amidst which, Reverend Sanlu revealed himself, bringing Madman Shui and Hidden Heart with him. He strode before Lu Yi and gave him a few dozens of slaps on the face. The slaps made Lu Yi's face swell up, and blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth, flowing down his cheeks and falling to the ground. Pointing his finger at the dumbfounded Lu Yi, Reverend Sanlu bellowed, "How presumptuous! Whose advisor are you? Do I need to explain to you what I'm doing?" Then, he gave Lu Yi a kick and sent him flying away, roaring, "Kid, your background is unknown. So what if you've really pointed out the true form of this Ganoderma immortal? Do you really think I can use your plan without any worries?" Ah! Apart from the 4 gates and 4 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation, don't tell me you're going to come up with another 8 gates and 8 quadrants immortal slaughtering formation and drag me into it as well? Lu Yi was struck dumb. He gave Wu Qi a look, then turned to Reverend Sanlu. After a brief moment of pondering, he realized that what Reverend Sanlu said did make sense. As an outsider who had just arrived in this world, he had suddenly come to Reverend Sanlu and told him that he had a good plan that could help Reverend Sanlu become the master of the area 1 million miles around Anhe City. No one with a normal mind would believe his words for no reason. Reverend San Li's reaction was perfectly normal. But, it was not within Lu Yi's expectation. Laughing bitterly, Lu Yi picked up Wu Qi's medicine bottle and said bitterly, "Reverend, time will reveal a man's heart. Even if Reverend San Li does not trust my words, you shouldn't have triggered this in such a hurry. Now that they are fighting each other, doesn't that mean the Ganoderma immortal is going to be taken advantage of by someone else?" Reverend San Li snorted and ignored Lu Yi. With a gloomy face, Lu Yi poured out a handful of medicinal powder carefully concocted by Wu Qi from the bottle. Clenching his jaws, he pressed the powder onto the fist-sized bloody hole on his buttocks, which was burned by the thunder flame. A shrill and miserable howl suddenly rang out from the woods. Lu Yi's body twitched violently as he fell to the ground, unconscious. Lu Yi knew that when applying medicinal powder to wounds, it would cause him some pain. But, never in his wildest dreams did he expect that the medicinal powder concocted by Wu Qi would cause him such pain. Looking at the unconscious Lu Yi, Wu Qi shook his head and said with a cold grin, "This young fellow is quite interesting." Reverend San Lu and the other celestial fiend puppets were laughing coldly, while Lao Ai said leisurely, "Let's get this over with as soon as possible. I've absorbed all of Lady Qiao's cultivation base. TSK, as long as I unleash my aura, I will be able to transcend my heavenly tribulation and become a heaven immortal. Immortality, I never thought I would have such a day." Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a look, then sent him a voice transmission with his divine will, "Too bad, your immortality is completely controlled by someone." Lao Ai's face fell instantly. Clenching his jaws tightly, he snorted coldly. Wu Qi paid no heed to Lao Ai. Instead, he produced a supreme-grade spirit jade he brought back from Myriad Immortals' planet, from which he removed a fragment the size of a toddler's palm. Holding a tiny flying sword in his hand, Wu Qi skillfully carved a large number of ancient patterns of flowers, birds, insects, and fishes on the spirit jade. Years ago, when Lu Xiaobai was forging all kinds of ancient jade artifacts, he had studied these carvings painstakingly, and as Wu Qi had inherited his skill, he was very skilled in carving. As a result, the patterns he carved did have a unique taste. Spirit Jade Fragment. The so-called fragment meant that this piece of jade looked like a small part of a token. The patterns on it were simple and unadorned, and there were a few lines of extremely ancient primordial divine text talismans inside. These were genuine primordial divine text talismans, and anyone with a discerning eye would be able to recognize them. Amidst these patterns and runes, Wu Qi carved a small line of characters using the bird and insect seal script, which read, "Left Minister of Province, Yu Miao." Only half of the character, Miao, was carved, and a small part was missing at the edge of the jade fragment. After finishing the small jade fragment, Wu Qi's palms suddenly shot out raging fire and ice, as well as wisps of electric arcs. After fiddling with the jade fragment for a while, he carefully cast a restrictive spell on it. Because of Wu Qi's arrangement, the texture of the jade fragment was as hard as flour. With just a slight vibration, it would turn into ashes. But, with the restrictive spell cast by Wu Qi, it would remain unscathed even if it was struck by a large hammer. After weighing the jade fragment in his hand, Wu Qi carefully shoved it into Lu Yi's waistband. There were a few secret pockets on his waistband, in which there were some money, jewelry, and other valuables. Wu Qi shoved the inconspicuous little jade fragment into the furthest corner of Lu Yi's waistband. Lao Ai felt his scalp go numb when he saw what Wu Qi was doing. "Are you trying to use him to frame someone?" Wu Qi smiled faintly and said in a low voice, "It might not work, just in case. Since someone wants to use us to set up a trap, then don't blame me for using their lives to frame an old fool who nearly killed me." Casually, he pointed a finger at Lu Yi's forehead, making him unable to wake up for a while. After that, Wu Qi nodded at Lao Ai and said, "You stay here and watch the show. I'll go look around. The people behind Lu Yi should be watching the commotion here as well." Lao Ai nodded. He came next to Lady Qiao's corpse and picked her up, preparing to give her a proper burial. Meanwhile, Wu Qi beckoned at a few celestial fiend puppets. Min Hua, Min Yi, and a few other disciples of Min clan with low cultivation bases flashed, transforming into phantoms and fusing into Wu Qi's body at the same time. Wu Qi glanced to the left and right, then glanced at some lofty mountains in the distance. After that, he stomped his foot, transformed into a stream of yellow mist, and plunged into the ground. On a lofty peak about 200 miles away from the slanting peak where Lord Jade and Mr. Gold were fighting desperately, the few young men Wu Qi saw during the day were frowning and watching the battle from a distance. The young captain standing in the middle growled furiously, "What is Louis doing? Why did he launch the attack in such a hurry? What exactly is going on? Why have the people from Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple started to fight desperately before the proper arrangements are made?" Wu Qi squeezed out from a crevice of a rock less than 100 feet behind them. With his back leaning against a clump of wisteria, he stood quietly and stared coldly at the group of young men. He stood under the bright moonlight in an imposing manner, as if he did not pay any attention to the few young men. One of the young men said in a low voice, "Perhaps something has happened to Reverend Sanlo. After all, we only speculated that he might be executed by Euphoria Heavenly Palace. But, it is also possible that he is too timid to do such a thing. Therefore, it is possible that he has sent a message to Euphoria Heavenly Palace." Suddenly, another young man grabbed a jade talisman and put it under his ear, listening carefully. Then, he said joyfully, "Don't worry, General. Lady Qiao's adoptive father, Patriarch Muji, has learned that Lady Qiao was killed, and he is coming here with his disciples. Those monks from Golden Pavilion Temple have also invited Arhat Wrath from Minor Serene Buddhist land, and they are also coming here. For the sake of the energy essence left behind by this Ganoderma immortal, I'm sure they will fight each other." The young general breathed out a sigh of relief, then said with a cold grin, "That's good. As long as both Patriarch Muji and Arhat Wrath are wounded, Anlu County will be in my hands. At that point in time, I'll be conferred a title of nobility for my meritorious service, and all of you will be rewarded." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then pointed his finger out. The spirit-restricting rope transformed into a beam of purple light and shot out, bundling all the young men up like rice dumplings. He was too lazy to find out where these young men came from, and what kind of background they had. Wu Qi thrust the sword of greedy wolf out and pierced through their foreheads, ripping their souls and the beast's souls that were living together with them into pieces. As the young general's cultivation base was barely close to that of a heaven immortal, how could he have the strength to resist Wu Qi's sneak attack? The sword beam spun, and Wu Qi chopped off their heads. After that, a beam of white light shot out from the spirit breeding ring, pulling their bodies into it. "Well, the heavy responsibility of slandering Yuzong will now fall on you and Lu Yi." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi raised his head and looked over at the battlefield. If he had not seen it, he would not have known, but when he did, he was really startled. In just a short period of time, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had fled with their bodies bathed in blood, and one of the 3 heaven immortal old monks from Golden Pavilion Temple had fallen. Meanwhile, the rest of the cultivators were engaged in a chaotic fight, crazily fighting for the Ganoderma. Seeing that Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had fled tens of miles away, Wu Qi dared not to waste any more time. Hastily, he changed his visage and plunged into the ground. Chapter 436. 2 strong beams of light, one gold and one green, were fleeing hastily in midair. Covered in blood, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold felt like weeping but had no tears. "It's all your fault." While fleeing, they kept cursing each other with the most vicious words. Their faces were filled with resentment. The fact that Lady Qiao was killed by the Golden Pavilion Temple was a heart-wrenching pain to them. They felt that it was all the fault of the other party. If it was not for the fact that the other party made a mistake and failed to protect Lady Qiao, how could a beautiful lady like her be killed by a bunch of bald donkeys? On the contrary, they were not very interested in the energy essence left behind by the Ganoderma immortal. Lord Jade and Mr. Gold were the typical foppish young masters. After painstakingly cultivating until they became 33rd-tier heaven immortals, they had put all their interests into pursuing women and indulging in extravagant pleasures. That was the reason why they were always following Lady Qiao, and became the two most famous gigolos among her countless gigolos. Today, when Lady Qiao was killed, both of them felt as if a piece of their heart was dug out by someone, and it brought them extreme heartache. Filled with rage, they attacked the monks from Golden Pavilion Temple at the same time. But, little did they expect that the defense of the monks was extremely ridiculous. Even when they joined forces, they still could not break through the impenetrable defense of the monks. While they were fighting desperately, those cultivators who were trying to take advantage of the situation outside suddenly appeared. 5 heaven immortals, several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators, and several hundred nascent soul and Jin Dan cultivators attacked at the same time. Moreover, they happened to strike at the moment when the battle between them and the monks was the fiercest, when both sides were greatly weakened. Although both of them managed to flee with severe injuries, one of the monks from Golden Pavilion Temple was killed on the spot due to carelessness. "It's all your fault." Both of them cursed again. They had been Lady Qiao's gigolos for a long time, and their friendship was not shallow. Therefore, they knew quite a lot about each other's dirty deeds. Now that they had lost Lady Qiao, the lubricant, they shed all pretenses of cordiality and cursed each other, which was very unpleasant to the ears. At least, Wu Qi, who had sneaked ahead of them using innate earth element escape art, could not bear to hear their curses. 7 celestial fiend puppets transformed into huge, 90 feet tall, bronze-colored celestial fiend gods and soared into the sky, emanating a very strong fiend aura as they leaped towards the two men. These celestial fiend puppets cultivated the celestial fiend battle the heaven script, which was a body-tempering cultivation technique from the Fiend League. They were best at close combat, and basically, they could be used as humanoid magical treasures. The 7-headed demon god teleported beside the two of them, and 14 fists rained down on them like a storm. Each of his punches contained a very strong devil energy, filled with devouring power, corrosive power, and all kinds of negative energies. They smashed heavily on Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, who were caught unprepared, and knocked them back. A large sheet of golden light burst out from Chi-Chi's body. Both of them were quite famous for their wealth in the vicinity of Anhui City, and each of them had 3 to 4 defensive immortal items. Although they were caught off guard by the sudden attack of the celestial fiend puppets, their immortal items had automatically protected them from the attack, barely managing to block the attack for them. However, these two men had been living like princes for several hundreds of thousands of years, and it had been a long time since they fought with anyone. As a result, Lord Jade and Mr. Gold had long forgotten how to fight. When they were attacked by the celestial fiend puppets, they had to rely on the automatic protection of their immortal items to avoid death. Therefore, they were not thinking about how to deal with the enemies, but Chi-Chi, who was acting like a master, cried out at the top of his lungs, "How dare you? Little brat, do you know who we are?" Wu Qi sprung out from under the ground. He was too lazy to care about who these two men were. After giving them a glance, Wu Qi slapped the top of his head. A plume of gray smoke shot up into the sky amidst jarring ghost howls. Amidst the smoke, the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag slowly revealed its true form. It was impossible for the other immortal items. Wu Qi had to break their defense in a short period of time. The Dark Yin Hasek did possess a frighteningly powerful power, but it did not listen to Wu Qi's command. Therefore, the only thing he could borrow now was the power of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. Wu Qi took out the soul-searching flag and gripped its handle with his right hand. Clenching his teeth, he sprayed a mouthful of blood essence onto the flag, raised it up high, and waved it forcefully. A series of strange whistling noises rang out, as the glow on Lord Jade and Mr. Gold's bodies dimmed abruptly. Their eyes went blank, and their eyeballs began to spin wildly. They had lost their senses because of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. 7 celestial fiend puppets sprung into the air, throwing 14 fists and smashing them around, causing the glow on their immortal items to dim. After that, they grabbed their heads and twisted their necks. Two mighty 33rd tier heaven immortals, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than Wu Qi even though they were severely wounded, were killed by Wu Qi as easily as slaughtering chickens. What a great treasure! Thanks to you today. Wu Qi happily stroked the jade bone's soul-searching flag, and had a higher opinion of the power of this immortal item. It was a pity that the item spirit of the flag was still in a deep slumber, recovering. Otherwise, he would be able to find out what grade of immortal item it was. A stream of divine flame of order sprayed out and burned into Lord Jade and Mr. Gold's 7 orifices. In just a blink of an eye, both of them were turned into a large pile of blood and soul crystals. Right at this moment, a series of bird cries rang out, as over 30 strange beams rushed out from their bodies, trying to flee in all directions. Wu Qi snorted coldly. He pointed his finger out, and a faintly discernible strand of innate aura rushed out. All of a sudden, the over 30 beams, which had fled several thousand feet away, stopped abruptly and flew back quickly, wheeling around Wu Qi for a while to sense the faintly discernible innate aura. After that, they cautiously approached Wu Qi. Wu Qi nodded his head and said in a low voice, "Submit to me wholeheartedly, and in the future, all of you will have the chance to break away from the item spirit and reforge your fleshly body." The over 30 beams let out joyful cries as they flew into Wu Qi's body, then obediently opened up the core of their item spirit, allowing Wu Qi to leave his divine will mark in their souls. For these middle and lower grade immortal items, the attraction of innate aura was simply too strong. On the other hand, Wu Qi was a little worried. When he sensed so many weapons on his forehead, including blades, spears, swords, halberds, axes, and spears, he could not help but sigh inwardly. How was he going to handle so many immortal items? Left with no other choice, Wu Qi could only send a clear divine will to them. Wu Qi would also transfer them to other people, but as long as they were obedient and devoted to the task of a qualified immortal item, Wu Qi would reward them with a part of innate aura from time to time. Do you know how precious innate aura is? If you do not contribute anything, why should I give you such a great benefit? These were the exact words Wu Qi used to deceive these immortal items. The item spirits were sensible, and one after another, they agreed to Wu Qi's condition. Only then did Wu Qi breathe out a sigh of relief. Although his current overall strength was strong enough to fight against a heaven immortal, if over 30 immortal items were to revolt, even a formidable immortal like Heavenly Lord Senyu would have a headache, let alone Wu Qi. After dealing with Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, and subduing over 30 immortal items, Wu Qi put away all the blood and soul crystals, then quickly plunged into the ground and rushed back to the battlefield. Lao Ai brought Madman Shui, Hidden Heart, and the unconscious Lu Yi, hiding in a far distance and watching the battle. After Wu Qi reunited with Lao Ai did not ask him where he had gone and what he had done. Instead, he told him directly, "That old monk and that old fellow look very strong." During the period of time when Wu Qi was pursuing and killing Lord Jade and Mr. Gold, a great change had taken place near the battlefield. The cultivators who attacked Lord Jade, Mr. Gold, and the monk from Golden Pavilion Temple, as well as the cultivators who fought for the Ganoderma immortal's body, were all killed. Now, there was only a skinny old man, who stood about 3 feet tall and had a gloomy expression on his face, and a fat monk, who was tall and burly, and had an angry expression on his face. After communicating with Lao Ai through divine sense, Wu Qi finally learned what had happened during this period of time. The skinny old man was Patriarch Muji, and the fat monk was Arhat Wrath. Nominally, Patriarch Muji was Lady Qiao's adoptive father, but in fact, Lady Qiao was his direct disciple, his lover, and also the agent he used to travel across the surrounding areas of Anhui city. On the other hand, Arhat Wrath was his master in the minor serene Buddhist land, and the abbot of Golden Pavilion Temple was his disciple who listened to the scripture. Both of them possessed the cultivation base of 24th tier heaven immortals, and they were the representatives of various immortal sects who invaded Anhui city. Over the years, they had only manipulated some superpowers to fight against each other, but both of them cherished their feathers, and had never struck out easily. But this time, when the essence of the Ganoderma immortal was right in front of them, no matter how much they cherished their feathers, they had no choice but to fight each other. As soon as they appeared, they killed the cultivators who came to take advantage of the commotion. Patriarch Muji specifically killed the heaven immortals and cultivators from the righteous sects, while Arhat Wrath was merciless to the cultivators from the evil sections. Working together, in just a few breaths of time, they had killed all the cultivators who dared to stick their heads out within a radius of 30 miles, leaving only a few cultivators from Euphoria Heavenly Palace and monks from Golden Pavilion Temple behind. Before Wu Qi came back, both of them just stared at each other blankly, not saying a word. When Wu Qi came next to Lao Ai and intentionally unleashed a tiny bit of his aura, both of them turned to look at Wu Qi. After that, Patriarch Muji suddenly said, "Bald donkey, if you take a step back today, I'll definitely reward you handsomely in the future. We've killed so many people just now, and there are many juniors watching us. Are we really going to fight each other and let them watch the fun?" Arhat Wrath chuckled, nodded his fat head, and said seriously, "This item is fated with the Buddhist League, so I can't let you take it away. Patriarch Muji, if you take a step back today and form a good relationship with the Buddhist League, I'll spare your life 3 times in the future." Patriarch Muji snorted coldly, then pointed his finger at Arhat Wrath and said with a cold grin, "If that's the case, let's see who's stronger with our fists. Bald donkey, you're already dead." As soon as the words left his mouth, dark, stinking sweat suddenly oozed out from under Arhat Wrath's skin. His body shriveled abruptly, and the relic lotus throne above his head began to wither as well. All of a sudden, the signs of the decay of the Deva appeared on his body. Arhat Wrath was startled, and he cried out in a deep voice, "The Dharma of Buddhism is boundless. How can an evil fiend withstand a single strike from me?" A golden light radiated from his body, and Arhat Wrath's body quickly returned to its original state. On the other hand, Patriarch Muji's body began to expand abruptly. His once dark skin gradually took on a faint golden hue, making him look like a statue crafted from pure gold. A ring of Buddhist light was even seen emerging from the top of his head. Patriarch Muji cried out in shock, then breathed out a long sigh and said, "The righteous cannot suppress the evil. In the end, the Buddha will become the evil." After that, Patriarch Muji transformed into a beam of dark light and sped towards Arhat Wrath. Arhat Wrath's face turned solemn. He opened his mouth and let the beam of dark light rush into his mouth. A few old monks from Golden Pavilion Temple sat cross-legged next to Arhat Wrath, reciting the subduing evil scripture in unison. Suddenly, a dark mist sprayed out from all over Arhat Wrath's body, and the left side of his body abruptly turned into a skeleton. Wu Qi gasped. These 2 old monks had really risked their lives. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.